right, it is February 16th, 2021, calling the regular council meeting to order. Ms. Salzberg, roll call, please.
Mayor Deasy.
Present.
Vice Mayor Daggett.
Here.
Councilmember Aslan.
Present.
Councilmember McCarthy.
I'm here.
Councilmember Salas.
Present.
Councilmember Shimoni.
Present.
Councilmember Sweet.
Present.
All right, I'd like to take the pledge today, and we'll have the Councilmember McCarthy take our mission statement. So if we all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. The mission of the City of Flagstaff is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Fubar, do we have any items for public participation or any participants?
Mayor, we do. Jessica, do you have John Victoria on the line, or do you need me to call him?
I do. Mr. Victoria, would you like to go ahead and give your comment, please?
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. My name is John Victoria, and here goes. First things first. Ross Altenbaugh, Adam Shimoni, Becky Daggett, and Austin Aslan. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. On February 9th, each of you shared with our town as best you could under the circumstances, your wisdom, your insight, your compassion, and your integrity. What a wonderful gift for Flagstaff. Each of you personify and manifest a leadership that allows our town to grow in honor and progress. Thank you. Paul Deasy, you make me sick to my stomach, Paul. Perhaps literally. Your reckless, shallow, backward, adolescent, and ultimately mean-spirited words and accusations stand as an insult and an indignity to anyone and everyone who believes in decency and human behavior. Clearly and undeniably, you are an arrogant, self-centered, irresponsible, dangerous, malignant narcissist. Can I ever trust you again? Maybe, maybe not. Bottom line, Paul Deasy, is you make me sick to my stomach. In conclusion, Ross, Adam, Becky, Austin, from my heart to yours, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Fubar, do we have any other individuals for public participation?
We do not.
All right, well, we're down now to agenda item number 5 for proclamations and recognitions. And this month is, as we know, Black History Month, so it is my honor to read this proclamation from the City of Flagstaff. Whereas the City of Flagstaff celebrates the rich cultural traditions and proud ancestry of African Americans and peoples of the African diaspora, and recognize that the vital contributions African American peoples and peoples of the African diaspora have made to strengthen and diversify our community. And whereas African Americans and peoples of the African diaspora have played and continue to play an integral role in shaping, developing, and creating a vibrant city, first as pioneers working in the city's sawmills and railroads, and later as educators and professors, civil rights activists, community organizers, and public servants, including a mayor. And whereas the Flagstaff City Council established the Commission on Diversity Awareness to advise the City Council on issues and methods in promoting diversity awareness within the City of Flagstaff. And whereas the Flagstaff City Council dedicated to understanding the Black lived experience and its commitment to doing so through the adoption of the Lived Black Experience Strategic Plan in December 2020 that provides clear direction and guidance to address conditions of African Americans and peoples of the African diaspora in the Flagstaff community. And whereas the Commission on Diversity Awareness recommends the designation of February 2021 as Black History Month, in unison with national and statewide observances. Now therefore I, Paul J. Deasy, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2021 as Black History Month in Flagstaff in recognition of the history, heritage, and contributions of Black peoples of this great land. I would like to thank Ms. Deb Harris for helping to craft this proclamation and the honor and the need to recognize the history and heritage of our Black diaspora and our Black community. So thank you. We are now down to agenda item number 6, our liquor license public hearings. I would like to take all 3 of these all together. City staff, do we have any presentations or so forth on this or words?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Sergeant Ryan Turley here to answer any questions regarding the applications before you, and I believe the applicants are here as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, if any of the applicants would like to speak, now would be a great time before we bring in any public comments regarding this. Mr. Craig Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. My name's Craig Miller, and I work with the Arizona Liquor Industry Consultants, where we work with multiple licensees throughout the state of Arizona, and we're going to be working with the Sportsman's Bar and Grill. I just want to make sure I'm available if there's any questions or if anybody has needs clarification on any of that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, sir.
Since we're taking all these together, does any of the other applicants would like to speak at this time? And you don't have to if you don't want to, but I know we have a couple on here. All right, I'm not seeing it this time. Councilmember McCarthy has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions for the applicants, but I would like to thank them for being here, you know, on the theory that we might have had questions. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And then do we have, Ms. Fobar, any public participants for any of these liquor license hearings?
We do not, Mayor.
Do not. All right. Well, thank you. Do we have any, Councilmember Salas, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to commend all the applicants for putting forth their liquor license application, and that means they're continuing to thrive as business in Flagstaff. So I move to forward all 3 applications to the State Liquor Board with the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Salas, seconded by Councilmember Shimoni. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. At this point, I'd like to, I should have done it beforehand, but closing the public hearing. We are now down to...
That is okay, Mayor. This is Sterling Solomon, the city attorney. I appreciate you closing that. I was trying to unmute before the vote took place and I could not, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, city attorney. My apologies on not doing that first, but moving right along here, we are down to agenda item number 7. This is our consent items. And I think with the interest in these, it would be good to split them up a little bit in case there's any questions. The first is consent item on agenda 7A, and that's the consideration and approval of the purchase of 4 2021 Ford Police Interceptor utility hybrid vehicles in the amount of $152,108.55 from Santan Ford. Staff recommended action is to approve the contract with Santan Ford for the purchase of 4 2021 Ford Police Interceptor utility hybrid vehicles, a total cost of $152,108.55. I would just like to mention that, yes, our liquor license approvals have been put forth. So, Mr. Patel, yes, that agenda item is done. If you'd like to stay, that you're welcome to, but otherwise your section is completed. Vice Mayor Daggett has a question regarding agenda item 7A.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for the chief, and that is, well, actually, if I could start with Mr. Brown regarding the, regarding the bids, and ask about whether we could postpone this and go back out to bid. As I understand it, our local dealer had to rescind their bid, and I'm wondering whether they expressed an interest in resubmitting if they had the opportunity to do so.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members. Vice Mayor Daggett, we can, it's up to Council whether or not they want to approve or not approve, and then direct staff to go back out with another bid. Just by virtue of them submitting a bid the first time around, they are interested in the procurement of these vehicles. However, due to the error, they were needed to withdraw their bid. I don't know that what their next bid will be, or if they would win that bid, but we certainly can do whatever the council directs us to do.
Thank you. And then Chief Musselman, if you are on this call, I'm wondering what the impact would be to you all if we postpone this and went back out to bid. I would very much like to hear from a local, have a local company have the ability to resubmit a a bid.
So thanks for the question, Vice Mayor. So that'll push us back about 6 weeks to up to 10 weeks on building these cars at least. And we're kind of in a bind. Our current vehicles are maxing out or getting in wrecks. So it's kind of a crapshoot, really, if we will need these ASAP or if we just keep bandaging up the old ones and keep them out and running. So I know that's not the best answer for you. It will hurt. It's just how painful of a hurt will it be, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mayor. That's all I had.
All right. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Chief Musselman, if you could answer here, are any of the 4 vehicles that are needing to be replaced right now currently out of service?
No, currently we have enough vehicles due to our low staffing level. So we're down 10 officers right now, with 4 either in the police academy or going to the academy. So we're doing okay now. As far as miling out, do we know how soon they'll be miling out?
Before we take inventory.
We will have a couple that will be miling out before we take inventory of these 4 new ones. It just means that those vehicles are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whereas right now they may run a day shift, a swing shift, and then have some downtime for a graveyard shift, not being driven.
And thank you, Chief. Councilmember Aslan has a question.
Thank you all. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, Mayor. So this question, it's for procurement. Thoughts on this, at least initially, and sustainability. I don't know, maybe everybody can weigh in. But this is just a general conversation about why are we going with hybrid vehicles instead of all electric? For example, like the Model Y Tesla. I think it's an interesting question to ask just to get the conversation going. I think there's some life cycle issues that we could be talking about when you look at the long-term life cycle of an all-electric vehicle. It might be a little bit more expensive up front, but it might be the route we should be thinking of going in as these procurements continue to happen. And just curious where the police department is at in terms of their perception and confidence level that these vehicles can do the job and keep our officers safe. I of course believe they can, but I'm just curious what the gossip is inside the department and what we're doing to sort of improve awareness there. And again, just a general open question. I think hybrid's great. You know, it's a good idea from an emissions perspective, and maybe it's a stepwise thing. I just wanted to get that conversation going here. Any
Good
thoughts?
afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Allison Hughes, a Sports Services Supervisor. I put together this request. We are definitely keeping an eye on the electric vehicles. There are a couple agencies in California that are currently running the Teslas. Right now, there's just not enough research on those vehicles and how well they hold up with, 24-hour shifts, keeping charged. For us, as far as the outfitting, most of our outfitting is done not directly from the dealership, but afterwards. And currently, there is no manufacturer for any of the police outfitting on the Teslas. Everything would have to be custom made. And then as far as vehicle size, we would prefer the SUV sized vehicle, as far as space for our officers, as well as, prisoner transport, being able to get all the equipment into those vehicles that we need for our officers.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I am curious to hear from procurement too, or I see the chief is back on.
So yes,
again, it's just a conversation starter here, but I thought it was an appropriate moment to get people thinking in new directions.
We actually did have a local resident reach out to us and offer us to take his Tesla for a test drive, and I told him the city didn't want to assume that liability because he hasn't seen the way I drive. But it's definitely on our radar as far as something new. I'd feel better if there was a local company that could service them here locally. If not, they'll have to send a tech out. And so that might be a delay in getting the repairs. But I would certainly be interested in council direction if that's a pilot program you're willing to let us go. I would like to maybe grab a couple new Teslas next year and outfit them and see how they work. I know the initial cost is more, but preliminary estimates were it would save you somewhere in the area of $12,000 to $18,000 in gas per year. And I don't know if those are real. That was just what some other people were advertising on some of the blogs that we were researching. So certainly willing to take.
Have you ever put your foot to the gas pedal of a Tesla?
No, a golf cart is about the closest I get to.
Well, I want to be there when you first do it. You're going to be very pleasantly surprised. It's pretty amazing.
Sounds good. Appreciate the thoughts and the direction.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from procurement or from the city manager's office?
Yeah, has there been any formal or financial assessment of doing electric at all, or is it just been kind of more tertiary looked at?
I will let procurement speak to whether we have pursued electric vehicles, and I might just offer a comment as to what might be the next step. Patrick?
Thank you, Greg. Mayor, Council, so procurement has not pursued specifically electric vehicles for police department use. We have made procurements for electric vehicles, I believe with sustainability, and we put in charging stations for those, but that's about the extent that we've gone for looking into the electric vehicles. That's not saying that's not something we can investigate or we can't investigate in the near future to see what electric vehicles are out there and the uses for them. Like Dan was saying, they haven't been tested with us yet, and we're kind of seeing how things are going with other agencies. And then it also, again, brings back, as Dan said, if we were to buy those electric vehicles, then the maintenance and repairs on those may not be of a local nature, or we don't know that the electric vehicles are available local too, because I know that that's a concern, trying to keep it local, although we can't do a local preference. We certainly want to include all those folks that are available.
Excellent. Well, if we are considering electrics for potentially future purchases with the police or whatnot, it would be nice to see what the differential in maintenance cost might be if these had to be, farmed out outside of the city to help with repairs. So that might be a nice piece of the puzzle when we consider this in the future. Councilmember Sweet has a comment, followed by Councilmember Salas.
Thank you. I was excited to see that we had a local dealership bidding process, and I would like to ask, if we were to open it back up, is there a way to contact that dealership and see if they would be wanting to do a rebid since it didn't work, since there was an error the first time? And I just, supporting local is important, and I think for us, if we could lead by example when we can. And I just want to thank staff for answering all of my questions. I was a little confused as to, why the local dealership backed out, and how we can move forward supporting local when possible. So if we could find that out, that would help me. Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Councilmember Sweet, we do reach out to all the local vendors when we put out, especially a vehicle solicitation. So everybody, or not everybody, but purchasing staff reached out to local dealerships when this was coming out to let them know that it was on the street, and they were given the link to look at the bid. Babbitt Ford did submit a bid and then realized that they calculated their bid incorrectly. We gave them the opportunity to still keep that price, the lower price that they had, and they said they could not offer a lower price than what they initially bidded, which was higher than the other bidders. And that was even taking the TPT tax out of their bid. We could certainly put it back out, but it does not guarantee that the local bidders would come in low. So in the bidding process, we have to go with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder in this instance.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'll go to real quick. City Attorney, did you have a comment about our discussion?
I do, Mayor. I appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure, if council, obviously, Patrick Brown has already mentioned to you your options, which is, to award one or to go back out. If you choose to go back out, obviously, without going into executive session, I'm not going to give you legal advice here, but I will say that rejecting all bids would be to come back and simply re-advertise openly so everybody has an opportunity to bid, not just one particular bidder.
Thank you, City Attorney. And City Manager, before we go to Councilmember Salas.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a couple of topics occurring at the same time here, and I don't want to offer my comments that might intervene with the other discussion, which is how to go forward with the procurement. I wanted to circle back on the topic of electric vehicles, but I think, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'll let the discussion about procurement have some finality, and then I'll offer my comments then.
Excellent. Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Salas, what's the question?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brown has mentioned why the local dealer pulled out or withdrew the original bid. So there was some kind of, there was an error. Mr. Brown, would you mind providing more information how the city, quote unquote, favors local bidders, knowing that there's Arizona Supreme Court ruling that it deemed unconstitutional to provide local preference in the bidding process. So walk us through like the other avenues where we extend some kind of a preference or give local bidders additional points when evaluating a proposal.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. I'd be happy to. So yeah, in lieu of not being able to actually award or give a preference to a bidder, the city procurement and other staff have gone through and put into place some areas that we could help boost that ability with some of our locals. One is we reduced the local bidders tax, the TPT tax, out of their taxed amount when they submit a bid. So when a bid is submitted by all vendors, they have to include their tax. And when we consider lowest bid, we consider all things inclusive of that bid, including tax, shipping, any other miscellaneous fees that they put in there, hazardous tire disposal, those kind of things. And so we, in the tax portion, pull out 2.051% for the TPT tax as a local entity. Another way we look at things or try to give a little bit of a boost to our local is we've worked with local contractors and design professionals as well as council, and we created some language to put into our construction and design professional solicitations to help, bring home some of that knowledge and experience in the local economy or a climate or geology that's similar to it. And we allow up to 10 additional points when being evaluated. And these are construction projects that are based on their qualifications and experience only. This is not something that we put into a hard bid process because we don't evaluate a hard bid process, or an IFB, if you will, and that is a hard bid process. And my apologies, IFB stands for invitation for bid. And in an invitation for bid, the lowest price prevails with the lowest responsive and responsible vendor. The next thing that we've done is the city has taken advantage of a state law that allows public agencies to set aside a percentage of procurements for products, materials, and services directly from Arizona certified nonprofit agencies that serve and employ individuals with disabilities without competitively bidding it. So the city has two agencies that we currently are contracted with that status. So One is our Quality Connections, our office supplier, and they're a local business, and they employ about 70% of their workforce with disabilities. And then the second one is our vending machine services. We hire, or we have our services, our vending machine services through and operated by a blind organization or an organization that is run by the blind community. And lastly, in our procurements, to give them a boost, all procurements under $50,000, that threshold. So those are procurements that don't need to come to council for approval. And under the $50,000, we can do quotes or we will do quotes. And since it's an informal process, and in many cases, we send those directly to local businesses and only to local businesses that are able to provide the needed product or services that we're seeking. So we have those 4 areas that we put into place to help give that boost to our local businesses to help them, get a leg up in the procurement process within the means of the law. Is that what you're looking for, Councilmember Salas?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Brown, for that clear explanation and illustrating how the city procurement process. Well, by the way, our city procurement team has been awarded nationally a couple of years ago. And
running.
Yes. And so we have an award-winning procurement process in place. And I do respect Madam Vice Mayor's perspective about, allowing a local supplier to bid. And, I am a cheerleader of Flagstaff Local. My action matters, supporting local business, buy local, shop local, dine local, drink local. But with this particular case, there's this very engaged process of purchasing. And then we had a local company who initially submitted a bid, but there was an error on the bid, so the bid was pulled out, and and then our city established purchasing process picked a winning bid. So opening it up to another bid doesn't guarantee the city that the local supplier, local dealer will submit a bid and will get that bid on that. And then in that process, we are also facing a 6-week backlog, which may pose serious challenges in having enough police vehicles available 24/7 for public safety. So with due respect, Madam Vice Mayor, I would not support a move to reject this contract and open it up for bid because of the explanation I've said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your work, Mr. Brown. And I think we're having a couple different conversations here. I also am all for buying local 100%. But from my understanding, Mr. Brown, even if we went back out, it's likely that the bids would come in the same and our local provider won't be competitive enough to receive the bid or receive the job. So given the concerns about going back out and the timing and the need for these vehicles by our police department, I also think we should just go ahead and do this. And have future conversations about electrifying our fleets. And City Manager, I'm looking at you. I wonder if we, if Council Majority, if we think that, I don't know if we need to do a fair item or if it's something we can weave in a future conversation. But talking about electrifying our fleet, how does charging work? How does maintenance work? Where would we get these products from? et cetera, et cetera. And I think that the pilot that Chief Musselman talked about was great. Obviously, all these things have dollar tags to them, so to be considered in our budget and our lack of budget flexibility. But I think there's a lot of good things that have come out of this conversation, so I'm grateful. So I think we should move ahead with this, council, and not delay this process. But I'm open to other people's perspectives. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. If we have any other comments or questions from council, please put them in the chat. And I'll, in the meantime, open it up to City Manager Clifton if you would like to speak to the electric before we take a potential motion on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, keeping a loose tally here, we probably do need to have a bit of a head count. And thank you for a thoughtful discussion. Back to the electrification, it's an intriguing topic and it's a timely topic. And as we are speaking about this, there are communities all around our nation that are exploring the means to electrify their fleet. So we are not alone. Other communities have started doing that. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know when I mention that the industry is rapidly changing, the inventory is changing, and what may not be available today will be available next year and the year after that even more. So this is a very good time to be having the discussion. Tesla is indeed a model that is being used elsewhere, but there will be other options, and there are options now. To the police chief's comment about preferring the SUV, and I would add to that in the Flagstaff environment and the weather for the past 2 weeks being a perfect illustration of the need for that. Yes, we need all-terrain, or pardon me, all-season vehicles that can handle challenging snow conditions, and so that indeed is a factor. In addition to what Councilmember Shimoni mentioned, other factors would be maintenance. Although it's conceivable that with a pilot program, we probably could arrange for some sort of set maintenance schedule that would be workable. And then of paramount importance is the infrastructure, notably the charging stations. And council's, of course, reminded that we have been installing these stations throughout. Sustainability has been an active stakeholder in this discussion, with stations going in at City Hall, stations soon to arrive at the airport parking lot, Public Works, and so forth. But we will need stations at the police department, and we will need more than one. There'll need to be a few of them. So I would suggest, as next steps, we're excited about this. We can put together a strategic plan, if you will, for how to move forward with a pilot project for electrifying some of our police fleet and report back to council with the findings. There's a few things to talk about here, but nothing that has been mentioned is insurmountable. This is all very doable, especially these days. Thank you for letting me share thoughts.
Thank you, City Manager. Yeah, one thing to note regarding the maintenance of the electrified vehicles, particularly, if we're buying new, is that so many of consumers in our population are also going to be buying them, and in a few years, it is it's not unlikely that we would have a maintenance being able to be done locally, especially if we're buying it new now. I'll just speak to a couple items. I do also care greatly about our figuring out ways that we can do our procurement through local businesses. And I believe I think this needs to be done from what our chief has said, and that hybrid vehicles at this point in time are suitable for our purposes, and hopefully in next year or whenever we need to be replacing some of these things, that we can have a more thorough discussion about the full electrification of vehicles. So I am in support of moving forward with the staff recommended actions. I do see Mr. Brown does have a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure. I think I see Sterling may have had a comment before me, unless he's already made his.
Oh, my apologies. City Attorney, do you have something to chime in?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really believe your city manager and Patrick in procurement, they have all steered you in the right direction here. The motion and consideration today will be about obviously this specific procurement. That said, the options of looking into electrifying the fleet in the future can be put on a future agenda, and the discussion here today has been appropriate on that as well. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. But the motion would not involve anything to do with the electric vehicle discussion, simply the procurement that's on the table before you.
Excellent. Thank you, City Attorney. Mr. Brown, did you have a further comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And it's just another quick comment in the regards to rejecting the bids, if that's the direction that council wants to go. If we reject bids, there are some variables that go along with that. To reject bids at this time and go back out, to do so with the same bid and same specifications, we would need to do so for budgetary purposes, or if we decided to postpone the purchase for a much further date out. Otherwise, if we reject the bids and go back out, we would need to change something in the specifications and not reject the bids just to rebid the exact same bids again to try and get a local preference on there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Brown. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the contract. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone for this great conversation. I'd like to move that we approve the contract with Santan Ford for the purchase of, do I need to read it all?
I think we're good with just the motion. City Attorney.
Okay, I move that we approve the contract.
Motion, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Daggett, seconded by Councilmember Shimoni. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. We are down to agenda item 7B, and this is the consideration and approval of contract. This is a contract with Corporate Technology Solutions for the purchase of audio and video equipment for the purpose of adding remote meeting technologies and enhancing select City Hall conference rooms in amount not to exceed $130,000. Staff recommended action is to approve the agreement with Corporate Technology Solutions to provide audio and video upgrades to council chambers, council conference room, and staff conference room in the amount not to exceed $130,000, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents. Council, do we have any questions or discussion on this item before I entertain a motion? All right, I'm not seeing any for discussion. Entertaining a motion here, Councilmember Shimoni has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. And sorry to be late to the game like that, but basically, CJ, my question is, this to me is very much just audio and visual and video for the chamber, for the back room and upstairs. Is there any effort at all to enhance the virtual world that we're all working and living in? As we move forward, it's going to be very much of a hybrid reality that we're living in. And I've had some good conversations with folks about the public engagement portion of the way we engage with the public. And CJ, and to city manager and to mayor, maybe this is a different conversation, irrelevant from this agenda item, and we can talk about that at another time. But I'm just wondering, have we looked at any other models across the nation as to how they're handling public participation in this virtual world and integrating the two realities?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Paul Santana, IT Manager. Just stepping in for CJ, Councilmember Shimoni. So the improvements that we are seeking to make on these spaces actually add a variety of features. Some of what you're speaking to are a bit more of a policy end as far as how we would like to handle in-person public comments and the like. So what we've focused on primarily is to ensure that we have the technology that will allow all possible avenues of participation. Speaking specifically to our council chambers, that includes making sure that we have integrated virtual meeting capabilities for both the public and council and city staff. So very similar to what we're currently doing 100% virtually, we would be able to add the in-person component to the meetings as well.
Okay, so this is step one, and then this will allow us to have that future conversation as to how we want to utilize these tools, correct?
I believe so, yes. We've of course already established a certain expectation of features, and we've been working closely with our city clerk's office, Ms. Salzberg, to make sure that she has the tools that she needs to make sure that we to make sure that we have everything that we need to address public concerns while improving these spaces and allowing a future where we have both in-person and virtual.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Perry, do you have a comment to add on to that?
Yeah, just to add on to that, thank you, Mayor and Council. CJ Perry, IT Director. One of the questions Councilmember Shimoni asked was, if we've looked at what other agencies are doing, what other places are doing to address public comment. We did a fairly in-depth analysis of what everyone else was doing early on during the pandemic, just to kind of see, and it was really all over the place. It ranged quite greatly. So we sort of kind of fell into what we're doing today, but we are more than happy to go out and look again and kind of see, where other places have been successful in different types of technologies that they used. I've reached out to several of my colleagues down in the Valley and on some of the IT directors down there. And again, like I said, it's all over the place, but I'm more than happy to look into it further and do our best to kind of streamline this process and make this as available as possible for the public.
CJ, thank you for that. And I'll just say in closing, I know that public engagement has struggled with this new platform, and I think we've done a really good job. Not to take away from our efforts, but I think that our engagement levels are just simply lower. And regardless, I just wonder if at a future time we can have a conversation about best practices and how we move forward, learning from other communities, and then also considering what we're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember and Mr. Perry. Do we have a motion to approve? Councilmember McCarthy?
Yes, I move to approve item 7B as previously read by the mayor.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion from Councilmember McCarthy, seconded by Councilmember Shimoni. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. We are now down to agenda item 8A. This is the consideration of contract. Reject all bids for the Eldon Lookout Road hazard tree mitigation. Staff recommended action is staff recommends that City Council reject all bids submitted for invitation for bids, number 2020-27 and number 2020-84 for the Eldon Lookout Road hazard tree mitigation project. Is there any presentation on this from city staff or any additional information?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I believe we have a presentation coming your way here.
Excellent. Thank you.
This is Neil Chapman, Forest Health Supervisor with the Flagstaff Fire Department. We do not have a presentation drafted for this.
I stand corrected. Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Neil, would you be kind enough to just give a quick verbal narrative as to why there's a recommendation to reject the bids? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. This is a new process for me as well. We had this project as a planned partnership between the city of Flagstaff and the Coconino National Forest. We put out some bids to try to remove some of the trees that were damaged in the museum fire along Eldon Lookout Road, but the bids that were all received greatly exceeded our budget. We restructured the project and posted a second bid, trying to create some areas for optional service work to see if we can get some work done within our budget, but that didn't really get us close to where we needed to be. So the city and the Forest Service developed some alternatives to manage the hazard trees along the road, and we reallocated these funds to other efforts within the bigger scope of this agreement. So we would like to reject all of the bids through both initiatives here, and this was working with Emily and Patrick. This has to go before council for all of these to be officially rejected.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for the description, Mr. Chapman. I really appreciate it. Council, do we have any questions or comments before I entertain a motion? All right, well then, Councilmember McCarthy.
Sorry, had to get the mute button. Thank you, Mayor. I move that we reject all bids for the Eldon Lookout Road as previously read by you, Mayor. That would be item 8A, reject the bid.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Councilmember Sweet?
I second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember McCarthy, seconded by Councilmember Sweet. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. We are now down to agenda item number 9. This is a public hearing, 9A, public hearing for Whispering Winds Sign Historic Overlay Zoning Map Amendment, PZ-20-00141-02, 922 East Route 66. The staff recommend action is to open a public hearing and continue that hearing to March 2nd, 2021. Is there any presentation on this from city staff?
I don't believe I'm going to answer that this time, Mr. Mayor. At the risk of being wrong, actually, I'm being facetious. I do believe we have at least a narrative coming your way here. Staff?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Deasy. This is Sarah Dector. I'm the Comprehensive Planning Manager for the City of Flagstaff. This item is a landmark overlay rezoning.
And Sarah, this is Sterling Solomon, City Attorney. I'm very sorry. I didn't hear the mayor indicate that the public hearing is open. Mayor, if you could do that, then we can proceed. Sorry.
No problem. I'd like to open this public hearing. Thank you, Ms. Dector. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Deasy. The item is a landmark overlay rezoning case. The city staff is representing the applicant here because the case is being presented due to an action of the Heritage Preservation Commission. We don't have a presentation or packet today because the Planning and Zoning Commission has not yet rendered a recommendation on this item. They have rescheduled their public hearing for February 24th, and therefore commensurate with that decision, we are requesting that council move this hearing to March 2nd so you can hear the item in the proper sequence with your commission. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you much. Do we have any comments or questions from council?
I mean, you're so far away. I know this really matters. Have you had your first shot yet?
Ms. Fobar, you're currently unmuted. Do we have any public comments for this section before I take a motion to continue? All right. Well, I'd like to motion to continue this public hearing to March 2nd, 2021. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Miranda Sweet.
Thank you. I have a motion by myself, seconded by Councilmember Sweet. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor, this is Jim McCarthy. Just to kind of clarify what's going on here, do we need to have 2 meetings with a public hearing? And is this counting as the first one, and March 2nd is the second one, or is it just that the March 2nd one is the only public hearing that we will need to do?
Ms. Decker, could you answer? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor DC, Councilmember McCarthy. The March 2nd is the only hearing that will be required, but it will have 2 reads of an ordinance for rezoning.
And I presume that you'll be giving us photographs and maps and all the standard stuff. All right, thank you. I will support this motion.
All right. Well, is there any further discussion, council? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Well, we will continue this hearing on March 2nd. We're now down to agenda item number 10A, and this is the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2021-01, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff amending the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone approximately 23.08 acres of real property generally located at 2701 South Woody Mountain Road, a portion of APN 112-01-019 from the rural residential zone to the medium density residential zone, with conditions providing for severability, authority for clerical corrections, and establishing an effective date. The staff recommended action is to read ordinance number 2021-01 by title only for the final time. All right, city staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tiffany Antal. We did a full presentation on this application 2 weeks ago, and we're here to answer, and the applicant is here to answer any additional questions you have about this application.
Thank you, Ms. Antal. Council, do we have any comments, any additional questions for city staff or the developer in this context? Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Antal. Mr. Crutchfield, welcome back, and to your team, welcome back to Flagstaff. Mr. Crutchfield, assuming you're with us, I wanted to know, did you make any progress on the amounts of affordable units for us?
Mayor DC.
Give me some good news. Some good news.
I already gave you some good news. So, Mayor Deasy, Councilmember Shimoni, members of the council, we made a priority around really aggressively going after climate issues and aggressively going after the very electric vehicle discussions you guys have already had. All of those things add cost. We believe that 2 things that are true of us. One is we've already made a commitment to the 20 units, and our goal in working with Mosaic is to drive construction costs down so that we can lower our price points. That is the way to solve this problem. You can't do it artificially. The more you do that, the more pressure you put on the project to even make it sustainable to where you can get it funded. So what I'm going to say to this is I feel like we've set a good standard. We've aggressively gone after climate. We've aggressively gone after affordability. If we're able to drive costs down, we'll do better. We can't document that because we don't know where our cost structures are. And we're willing to take the risk on what we've already committed, notwithstanding having all of our costs in place to understand where we would be. So I fully understand, Councilmember Shimoni, your heart. I think you know my heart in this. I think you know the efforts we've made. And what we always say to staff and to our team is we have to do better. Feel like we've set a good standard. We're going to drive to do better. My real hope in this is we can drive with partnering with Mosaic, costs down. The next iteration of units that we can do beyond Sky Cottages, drive the cost down again, and then eventually bring those costs back over to the fee side where we can actually offer a product that is going to keep families in Flagstaff. And that really is the long-term goal. So
I appreciate that. And good to see you, Walter, and thank you for this. I do like this project, as you know. And I'll just say in closing that I'm going to plant a seed for your next effort in Flagstaff. Let's break through that ceiling again and redefine where the bar sits in terms of Flagstaff affordable housing. Thank you, and thank you to everyone involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember and Mr. Crutchfield. Councilmember McCarthy has a question.
Well, thank you. I guess this question will go to Ms. Antal. Well, before I do that, I just want to make a comment on the previous discussion. You know, if we make more and more of the product affordable, capital A affordable, that's in effect subsidized housing. And the only way it gets subsidized is by the price of the other ones. So although it might provide more affordable housing, it drives the cost up for the other 90% of the units or whatever. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. But getting to my questions, Ms. Antal, last week we got a verbal out of Mr. Crutchfield that two things, that he would provide no automobile access, but he would provide pedestrian and bicycle access from this parcel to the parcel to the north. Has that been put into the development agreement?
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor and Council, and Councilmember McCarthy. The concept plan for this application includes pedestrian and vehicular, or includes bike and ped access already. So as a condition of approval, they are required to conform to this concept plan, which includes that bike and ped access.
Well, that was a pretty good answer. Thank you. And then the other thing we talked about is that flood retention area would not be grass, that it would be some alternate material. Is if we incorporated that?
Thank you again. I do not have anything articulated specifically in the development agreement or the conditions of approval, except that the requirements to put in that much sod, they would have to deal with our OASIS standards, and it'll be much easier for the applicant if they do not use a sod material. And I believe that we can continue to have those discussions with them through the site planning approval process.
Right, and Mr. Crutchfield, you're still in agreement that that will not be sod, is that correct?
Mayor Deasy, Councilmember McCarthy, you had my word on it already. I realize that Sterling will jump on and say that doesn't count, but my attorney is now going to jump in. But we couldn't agree more, Councilmember McCarthy, that that space sodded and watered was untenable, undoable. And I want you to know right now, I'm doing an installation, even as we speak, of synthetic turf to begin testing different kinds of synthetic turf because the technology has come a huge distance. So we're excited about other options. Turf is not, natural turf, water turf is not an option.
Okay, so I'm satisfied with that answer. And now, Tiffany, I have some more good news for you. I don't have any more questions.
Happy to answer any questions you have anytime.
Thank you, Councilmember and Ms. Antal. Council, do we have any further comments or questions before I entertain a motion? Well, I'd just like to throw out there that, I definitely understand you're doing quite a bit with this. I just want to reiterate what we had discussed a couple weeks ago, particularly to Councilmember Sweet's desire for more solar panels. And if that's an option moving forward, I know that's not part of the DA, but just one to continue putting that idea in our heads to see what else we can maybe do on top of. Aside from that, I don't see any further comments and questions from council. Councilmember Salas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to read resolution number 2021-07 by title only. Oh, sorry. Yeah, by title only. Thank you.
I second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Salas, seconded by Councilmember McCarthy. Is there any further discussion, council?
So in the chat, I see that there was a request for clarification. That motion was to read ordinance 2021-01 by title only for the final time.
Yes, that is to read ordinance number 2021-01 by title only for the final time. Any further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff amending the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone approximately 23.08 acres of real property generally located at 2701 South Woody Mountain Road, a portion of APN 112-01-019 from the rural residential zone to the medium density residential zone with conditions, providing for severability, authority for clerical corrections, and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, do I have a motion to adopt?
Mr. Mayor, pardon my confusion. So my first motion was the ordinance number 2021-01. So I move to adopt ordinance number 2021-01.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. I will second that motion to adopt ordinance number 2021-01. Council, do we have any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. We are now down to agenda item 10B, and this is the consideration and adoption of resolution number 2021-07, a resolution of the Flagstaff City Council authorizing the execution of a development agreement between the City of Flagstaff and VP 66 and Woody Mountain LLC for Sky Cottages at Timber Sky related to the development of approximately 23.08 acres of real property generally located at the northwest corner of Woody Mountain Road and McAllister Ranch Road and establishing an effective date. Staff recommended action is to read resolution number 2021-07 by title only. And I'll turn this over to Ms. Antal.
Thank you so much again. Tonight, this is the development agreement that follows the zoning map amendment that was just approved. The draft development agreement includes all of the provisions that you see here on this slide. This was presented in the original presentation 2 weeks ago. If you have any questions in regards to any of the offsite infrastructure improvements or affordable housing, staff would be happy to assist with those questions. In regards to the remainder of these items, the applicant is also here to answer any of those questions for you, and I can leave this up if you like.
Mayor, you're on mute.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember McCarthy.
I move that we read Resolution 2021-07 by title only.
I will second that motion. We have a first motion by Councilmember McCarthy, seconded by myself. Is there any further discussion, Council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion carries. City Clerk.
A resolution of the Flagstaff City Council authorizing the execution of a development agreement between the City of Flagstaff and VP 66 and Woody Mountain LLC for the Sky Cottages at Timber Sky related to the development of approximately 23.08 acres of real property generally located at the northwest corner of Woody Mountain Road and McAllister Ranch Road and establishing an effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Fobar. I'd like to motion to adopt resolution number 2021-07. Do I have a second?
Second, Salas.
All right, I have a motion by myself, seconded by Councilmember Salas. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We are now down to agenda item 10C. This is the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2021-02, an ordinance of the Flagstaff City Council amending the Employee Handbook of Regulations as established by Flagstaff City Code, Chapter 1 through 14, Personnel System, Section 1-14-001-0001, Personnel System adopted. City staff, do we have a narrative on this?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. This is Jeannie Gallagher, your Human Resource Director. This will be the first time that I'll be bringing a employee handbook ordinance revision before you. Before you this evening is actually a correction to a revision that was passed about a year ago by this council in March of 2020. The purpose of the revisions made to the handbook at that time were to create consistency in the calculation and offering of salaries and vacation leave for internal promotions to be more consistent with that we were able to do for new hires from outside the organization. You've heard about our compression problems, and this was probably a contributing factor. Unfortunately, at that time, this was the very first ordinance that I had put through the system to bring to council. And I was definitely naive in the process. Those of you who may remember your first civics class and you learned how a bill becomes a law, well, that's a little bit about how an ordinance gets before council, and it goes through a lot of different people. And so I failed to recognize at that time that a paragraph had been removed, deleted from the ordinance, from the policy that we did not intend to remove, and that actually was inconsistent with the purpose of creating this parity. The paragraph that was removed ensures an internal employee of a minimum of a 6% pay increase to receive a promotion, provided it wouldn't, of course, put them outside of the pay range or something like that. So what's before you tonight is really just to reinstate the language, that paragraph that had been inadvertently deleted during my proposed ordinance revision last year. And so I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Gallagher. Council, do we have any questions or comments?
Thank
you. Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. I'd like to motion to read ordinance number 2021-02 by title only for the first time. Do I have a second?
Second, Jim McCarthy.
All right, I have a motion by myself, seconded by Councilmember McCarthy. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff, Arizona, amending the Employee Handbook of Regulations related to compensation and promotion as established by City Code, Chapter 1-14, Personnel System, Section 1-14-001-0001, Personnel System adopted, providing for penalties, repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, and establishing an effective date.
Excellent. We are now down to agenda item 10D. This is the consideration and approval of lease amendment, lease number GS-09P-94446 for Building 3 of the United States Geological Survey, USGS, facility located at 2255 North Gemini Drive, Flagstaff, Arizona 86001. Staff recommended action is to approve the lease amendment to incorporate the Federal Acquisition Regulations Clause 52.204-25 prohibition on contracting for certain telecommunications and video surveillance services or equipment. City staff.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Bryce Doty, the Real Estate Manager, bringing this item to you today. From time to time, the GSA, the Government Services Administrators, they will amend the leases, and we have the option to either assert an adjustment in cost or to accept the amendment as is. In this case, they are asking to ensure that we comply with any regulations preventing some certain telecommunications and surveillance companies. We have we are in compliance right now, so there's no additional cost to this amendment, and we're asking you to simply approve the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Doty. Council, do we have any questions or comments on this agenda item? And if not, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Mayor,
All right.
this is Jim McCarthy. I propose that we approve item 10D on the agenda as read.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Vice Mayor.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Councilmember McCarthy, seconded by Vice Mayor Daggett. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion carries. We're down to agenda item 10E. This is the consideration of consent APS easement on Veterans Home property on McMillan Mesa. The staff recommended action is to approve consent to the easement between APS and the state of Arizona. City staff.
Good evening. This is Bryce again. Back in 2016, when we sold the land to the state of Arizona for the purposes of the VA home, that deed that we sold it to had conditions that they could not encumber the property without our consent. And as they have now constructed, or they're finishing constructing the building, they need an easement from to grant to APS to power the building on that property. So they are asking that we consent to the easement for purposes of connecting power to the Veterans Home.
Thank you. Council, do we have any comments or questions? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion. right. Well, I will make the motion then to approve consent to the easement between APS and the state of Arizona. Do I have a second? Councilmember Sweet?
I second.
All right. I have a motion by myself, seconded by Councilmember Sweet, to approve the consent to the easement between APS and the state of Arizona. Is there any further discussion, Council? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. All right, chugging along here. We are down to agenda item number 10F. This is the consideration and adoption of resolution number 2021-08, a resolution of the Flagstaff City Council directing the city manager to reduce the stage of the 2020 economic recession plan from the significant to the moderate and providing for an effective date. The staff recommended action is to read resolution number 2021-08 by title only. City staff.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members. My name is Rick Tatter. I'm the Management Services Director for the City of Flagstaff. This item, number 10F, is a resolution looking for your approval to change the stage of our recession plan. We are providing a kind of a brief overview of kind of what the stages of the recession plan are. And this is a follow-up to our February 2nd budget retreat, where we provided council updates on revenues and our projections going forward. At that time, we determined that the majority of our revenue estimates and of the aggregate are below a 5% loss in revenues projected for this current fiscal year. And so currently we stand in a significant stage of the recession plan, which is adopted by council back in May of last year. So in order to move back out of the moderate stage, we do require a council adopted resolution to move back to moderate. And that range is a 2% to 5% aggregate loss in revenues. And based on our projections, based on our estimates, we recommend moving back to that stage at this time. That's all I have prepared today, but if you do have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Tatter. Council, do we have any questions or comments? Councilmember Salas has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tatter, thank you for your presentation. Can you please refresh my memory when it comes to embarking on capital improvement projects? So will it be covered in the moderate stage, at least on the planning stages of capital improvement projects that were on hold?
Yeah, for capital improvement projects, we did not specifically put any of those on hold at this time. Major capital purchases, we were definitely reviewing and considering whether we want to buy now or wait to move out of moderate. So we've been doing a review, but capital projects that have been awarded contracts have already moved through certain phases. We continue to move on with those. And what usually happens in those types of funds is we come back with an adjusted budget to be adopted next fiscal year. We'll be going through that process, where if our resource is not available, we'll have to adjust the long-range plan of our capital improvements. So really no major impacts to those at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Tatter and Councilmember Salas. City Manager Clifton, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. And thank you, Rick, for queuing this up. Council, back at the budget retreat, we talked about the fact that the implementation of this plan enabled the city to reduce its losses And I just want to give some props to the finance team and the budget team for overseeing the curtailment of a lot of expenditures that are enabling us to have this discussion now. So some fiscal prudence and conservatism has led us to this point. I want to address a question that I would anticipate somewhere along the line, and that is, well, how do we go from moderate, assuming this is approved by council, to the first stage, which is the minor stage? That one will not require council action, but I want to give the council full assurance that we will be back before you before we take that action. This is a very collaborative effort. We want to share, we want to have dialogue and work through this and do so very carefully and methodically. So that will, even though it's not required, it will be coming your way. I hope that day is not too far off, but we will be conservative. We took our time on making this recommendation to council. I think I mentioned before that we could have had this discussion a couple of months ago, but fiscal prudence dictated that we wait and see, especially through the holiday season. And with the benefit of additional hindsight now, and certainly looking at December's numbers, we're on good footing here. And you can expect the same to happen when we are before you to talk about emerging to the minor stage at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. And I just want to say thank you, Mr. Tatter. Thank you for the whole team for having been proactive in having this recession plan up to having the fiscal prudence over the last year to bring it so that at this stage in February 2021 that we can consider doing this. I just really appreciate the hard work that was involved, as well as I am very, very thankful on the good news that the situation is not as dire as I and others may have originally expected back, say, in April 2020. So thank you for all your hard work. And council, if we don't have any questions, further questions or comments, I'm happy to entertain a motion. Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to read resolution number 2021-08 by title only.
I will second that motion. We have a motion by Councilmember Salas, seconded by myself. Is there any further discussion, council? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Well, I will say that we're plugging along here and very efficiently. So, oh, sorry, Ms. Fobar, go right ahead.
A resolution of the Flagstaff City Council directing the city manager to reduce the stage of the 2020 economic recession plan from the significant to the moderate and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Fobar. Do we have a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, Mr. Mayor. This is Councilmember Salas.
I have a motion by Councilmember Salas. I will second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Well, with that, I will, I guess, repeat myself that I appreciate that we are moving very efficiently through this meeting, and also repeat the wonderful words of our city manager of brevity is the soul of wit, from Shakespeare, actually, but I'll still coin it to city manager. With that, though, I would like to take a, let's say, a 10-minute break before we start into agenda item 11 with discussion items. So it's 4:30 now. If we could all be back here at 4:40. Thank you. Ms. Fobar, do we have council all back?
We are, and we are streaming. Yes, and we are streaming.
Excellent. All right, well, then we are down to agenda item 11A, And this is discussion of 4th Street, Lockett Road, Cedar Avenue roundabout alternatives. City staff, take it away.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members. My name is Jeremy DeGator. I'm a project manager in the capital improvement section here at the City of Flagstaff. Tonight, myself and Jeff Bauman, City Traffic Engineer, will be presenting on the 4th and Cedar Lockett Roundabout project. A quick overview of our presentation and discussion item for tonight. I'm going to give us a quick walk through the project background and location and get us up to speed on where we are today. Jeff's going to then walk us through a little bit on roundabout concepts and design treatments for bikes and peds and vehicles and so on. And we'll discuss some of the alternatives that were considered and finally present our preferred alternative and discuss some of the next steps on the project. Today, we are looking for council feedback and direction in helping select our final alternative, which will move forward into design. To orient everyone, this project is located at the intersection of North 4th Street, Cedar Avenue, and Lockett Road. There are several notable locations around this project. I'll point out to the southeast, we've got North Country Healthcare. To the east, we have the East Flagstaff Library and Coconino Community College. To the southwest, we have the Pine Forest Charter School. And to the northwest, we've got Mount Eldon Middle School and Puente. And we're surrounded by the neighborhoods of Greenlaw and Sunnyside. This is a Highway Safety Improvement Program project, or HSIP. And ultimately, the purpose of the HSIP program is to achieve a significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries through the implementation of infrastructure-related safety improvements. This isn't the first HSIP project here in the City of Flagstaff. Other examples include the citywide sign inventory and replacement program and pavement markings program, which help to increase visibility of signs and pavement markings. Bike lanes were added to Beulah Boulevard by narrowing up the center medians. The Schweitzer Turquoise Roundabout project was also an HSIP project. And then finally, citywide guardrail replacement and countdown pedestrian signal heads are other examples of HSIP projects here in the City of Flagstaff. Council may recall back in May of 2021, City Council approved an IGA, or intergovernmental agreement, between the city and ADOT for ADOT to administer the design and construction of this project. As we mentioned, the HSIP is a federally awarded grant. The city is contributing a little over $60,000 total, and the HSIP grant award totals a little over $1.9 million. We're currently in the design phase. Later this year, we hope to move into the right-of-way acquisition phase, and we have currently budgeted a little over $120,000 for right-of-way acquisition, and hoping to move into construction sometime in 2022. The primary thing to point out on this slide is that the city is responsible for any project costs in excess of the current grant award of $1.9 million. And some of the alternatives we're going to look at today, the right-of-way acquisition costs will likely exceed our currently budgeted amount. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff to kind of walk you through some details on roundabouts.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm getting transitioned here. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. Jeff Bauman, City Traffic Engineer, here tonight to talk to you about roundabout concepts in general, some specific feedback we've received through our outreach with the Transportation Commission, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and the Bicycle Advisory Committees. And then I'll give it back to Jeremy for our big reveal of our preferred alternative, which again, we're looking for concurrence tonight to continue on through the design process. Oops, sorry. So we'll talk about some common site applications for roundabouts. A roundabout should be considered anywhere a traffic signal or stop control is under consideration. I feel, and that really the transportation profession seems to be going this way, that roundabouts used to be considered just for special locations only. But over the past, and geez, it's probably been 20 years, we've been working on roundabouts more and more in North America. We've progressed quite a ways in our technical expertise and, importantly, public experiences. Everyone's driven a roundabout now. That certainly wasn't the case 20 years ago. And it's led to general public acceptance. We had really good feedback on the Schweitzer and Turquoise roundabout. It took several years to build, which was unfortunate, but now that it's open, we're getting really, really positive feedback. In Flagstaff, we're starting to take a look at roundabouts as an accepted option for intersection control in many different locations. You'll hear us talk about roundabouts quite a bit. Schools, somewhat maybe surprisingly, maybe not. Schools are a really good location for roundabouts. A primary benefit of roundabouts is the big reduction in vehicle speeds in and around the roundabout. So roundabouts improve pedestrian crossings by allowing pedestrians to focus on one traffic stream at a time. Single lane roundabouts are generally preferable to multi-lane roundabouts because they offer simpler crossings and they're simpler for vehicles as well. However, if traffic volumes are sufficient to require a multi-lane roundabout or a multi-lane approach, it's still typically preferable to a traffic signal or especially large signalized intersections. Corridors are a good place for roundabouts. You can probably all think of some corridors. Roundabouts do a really good job with access management. You can provide medians in between roundabouts because they offer opportunities to make U-turns. And one of our big reasons, intersections with existing high crash severity and frequency patterns. This was a high crash location that we're hoping to solve that crash pattern with this HSIP project. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Here's some generalized benefits of roundabouts. As Jeremy described, this is an HSIP project. The beginning of this project was a citywide safety scan to see where we had a pattern of crashes that could be corrected through one of the crash reduction factors that are accepted as part of the HSIP program. This location met the criteria and ultimately was awarded a competitive HSIP grant. For this particular location, we were at about a 5-to-1 benefit to cost ratio. So it will reduce the expected crash costs 5 times over the cost of construction, which, as Jeremy showed you, was about $1.9 million. So you can see some generalized total crashes by 35% reduction, pedestrian crashes by 40%, and the really big numbers, injury crashes and fatalities, 76 and 90%. Roundabouts offer traffic calming by reducing vehicle speeds using geometric design. And they work really well as a transitional element between commercial and residential areas, between high speed and low speed areas, which is sort of what we have at this corner. We have some residential to the north and east, more commercial activity to the west and to the south. And finally, some pedestrian safety and bicycle safety bullet points here, and we'll get into this quite a bit more as I go through the slide. So I'll keep going for now. So here's one of the big concepts, reducing the conflict points. In this slide, we're focusing on pedestrians. So I've already talked about roundabouts and their slow operating speeds. This is the big second ingredient, is reducing the conflict points. Let me change my cursor so it's a little easier to see. So this is a conflict point diagram just showing one leg. On the left is a traffic signal. And these dots are highlighting the conflict points between a pedestrian and a vehicle. I can kind of walk through these individually. So this first conflict point, if you can imagine, the traffic signal is green in the east-west direction. So vehicles are traveling maybe east and west. That'd be the same time that the pedestrian signal says walk, going in the east-west direction. So as the pedestrian's walking east or west, there's a conflict with folks turning right on green. Depending on if the pedestrian's walking left to right or right to left, that conflict is either coming from behind or coming in vision from ahead. The opposite is true for this left turn conflict. This sometimes can come from behind you or in front of you, depending on the direction of travel. This red conflict is fairly unusual, but it can happen. That's red light running conflict, and that could happen both northbound or southbound, actually. And this conflict is with right on red. So this one is tricky at a signal because the driver is looking to the left. Pedestrian could be coming from the right, walk out around the front of the vehicle. So that's a conflict point with the last conflict point on that leg for a traffic signal. Here's one of the benefits of the roundabout is we reduce the conflict points from 16 to 8. And they're much simplified. So at this pedestrian conflict, you can see pedestrian could be going left to right or right to left, and they just need to focus on one direction of vehicles, and those vehicles are exiting the roundabout. We place this crosswalk about a vehicle length or so away from the roundabout to give a little more time for these two to recognize each other, to recognize the vehicles actually exiting the roundabout. For the entering side, same thing. The idea is that a vehicle approaching the roundabout can see the pedestrian crossing right to left, left to right in this crossing, and then has this distance, usually a vehicle length or more, before they start looking left to yield to enter the roundabout. So that's pedestrian and vehicle conflicts. So reduced speed and conflict points. That's a couple of the big benefits of roundabouts and why we have such a reduction in crashes. Moving to the next slide, this is vehicle to vehicle conflicts. You can see on the left is a traffic signal. I won't go through all of the different conflict points, but you can see there's 32 conflict points between vehicle and vehicle. These are the different types: diverging, merging, and crossing. The really big difference between a traffic signal and the roundabout, which only has 8 conflict points, a merging and a diverging on each leg, is we get rid of all of these high angle, high impact, high energy crashes. These are where almost all of the fatal and serious injury crashes occur with the traffic signal. And by geometric design, you can get rid of those. So a roundabout doesn't get rid of all crashes, but it eliminates almost all or virtually all of the high impact, serious injury and fatality crashes. So when you do have crashes, they're typically these kind of side swipes, rear ends, much lower speeds, and much lower impact crashes. So let's look at existing conditions out there. I'll briefly review these existing conditions, and again, I'll continue to focus on pedestrians for now. We can see that we are missing the pedestrian crossing on the west leg. Go back to the laser pointer. We're missing the pedestrian crossing on the west leg, and that's one of the big goals of our roundabout project. You'll see in all of the alternatives that we've been able to provide crossings on all 4 legs. It's a very unusual intersection geometry. We don't have the crossing here, but we actually have a pedestrian crossing, a beacon here at Ellen Street, just off the screen, to try to make up for this missing leg. We do have pedestrian crossings on all the other legs, and one thing to kind of pay attention to with this aerial photo and think about is the number of legs on the approaches. The roundabout alternatives that we're going to present tonight have all been able to reduce the number of approach legs. So we have 3 lanes here for pedestrians to cross. You'll see we reduced that. Here on this approach, we have 4 approach lanes, and we'll be able to reduce that with our roundabout alternatives. Down here, this is 4 or 5 lanes, and you'll see that we were able to reduce that to 3. On this approach, again, there's no crossing here, but we still have 3 plus 1 lane, 4 lanes, and we're able to reduce that to 3. So pretty good improvements from existing conditions, and you'll see that as we jump in to the next couple of slides. So here's an example of a potential roundabout alternative. And I'm going to walk through pedestrian circulation and some of the benefits of the roundabout versus the traffic signal. And again, we're not picking between roundabouts and traffic signals. We're picking between different roundabout alternatives. But this has been helpful in our previous presentations with the bicycle and pedestrian advisory committees and the Transportation Commission, just kind of walk through some of these details to help you understand how we got to our preferred alternative. So pedestrian circulation, instead of, again, we don't even have a crossing on this leg, so maybe that's not a great one to highlight. But this south leg, we talked about, there's 4 or 5 lanes. And then depending on how you looked at it, there was the right turn lane to cross as well. With this roundabout alternative, we've been able to reduce the northbound to 2 lanes. It's our only 2-lane entry or exit. And the exit side is a single lane. So much simplified from the 5-lane crossing. We're talking, 12 to 13-foot travel lanes. So we're 25 feet here versus the 65-foot crossing that we had previously. On this leg, we have 3 lanes with a really broad radius and actually fairly wide lanes. We're able to reduce this crossing to 2 single lanes. You kind of see in the background here, we have this unusual right turn lane because of the geometry. Again, 3 lanes have been reduced to 2. So we've shortened the crossings. We're providing crossings on all 4 legs. As I talked about previously, when as a pedestrian, you're only looking at one approaching direction and not trying to look for people turning left, people turning right, right on red. It's much simplified. I talked about setbacks a little bit, and you can see that here. The crosswalk is always at least the vehicle length from the roundabout so that we can separate the 2 tasks, driver-pedestrian interaction, then driver-driver interaction here. No waiting. This is a big benefit that people don't always think about when they're comparing alternatives. With the traffic signal, the cycle, what we call the cycle, which is simplified, is basically if you're thinking about northbound green, it takes about 90 seconds for the traffic signal to service all of the movements and come back to northbound green, or in that case, northbound pedestrian. So you can wait a minute and a half as a pedestrian or as a driver waiting for your turn. At a roundabout, it's not no waiting, but as soon as there's a gap, you can go, which is usually much less than 90 seconds. Slower operating speeds, that's one of the foundational elements of roundabout design. And again, we talked about schools a little bit previously. Schools turn out to be a really good location for roundabouts because of these slow operating speeds and these really low crash rates. Good spots to have a roundabout. All right, let's talk about transition a little bit to bicycles. And I labeled this bicycle circulation, the basics. And I think many people know how this all works, but I just walked through it fairly quickly just to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, we had good discussions with the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee on some of these points. So at our intersection, we have bike lanes entering on all 4 approaches. So the roundabout design will look something like this, where we have a bike lane on the approach to the roundabout. You can see the roundabout up ahead here. This is an example from California. And bikes have 2 options. They may utilize the multi-use pathway. Bikes may use path as a typical sign. And shortly before the end of the bike lane, there's a ramp that takes bikes or gives you the opportunity to enter the multi-use pathway. Multi-use pathway is kind of another name. We call them foots, 10-foot facilities for bikes and peds. If you're comfortable as a cyclist, then you can take the lane. As vehicle speeds are slowing quite a bit here, typical operating speeds in roundabout are 15 to 20 miles an hour, somewhere in that range here. It's not terribly difficult as a high-end cyclist. Not all cyclists will want to do this, but some cyclists, for convenience, will want to take the lane and circulate through. So I have a couple of arrows here just to describe that in a little more detail. There's entering onto the multi-use path, and there is taking the lane as a vehicle, as another vehicle. Next slide is something we also talked about with the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and this is not always used, but we think this would be a really good idea here in Flagstaff. And this is a shared lane marking. So when a lane does not have a bike lane, and you don't put bike lanes in roundabouts because the bike lane would be on the right-hand side and you'd be creating conflicts with, it's kind of like putting a bike lane on the right side of a dedicated right turn lane. You'd end up creating a conflict points at each of these entrances and exits unnecessarily. So bikes circulate in the middle, taking the lane, and this is a pavement marking that we would recommend when we get into final design. At the other end of the roundabout, you can see that the bike lane is now starting again on the exit, and that's happening here. And bikes coming off of the multi-use path would have the opportunity to enter the bike lane here. So maybe a couple of arrows to show how that works. All right, here's a roundabout example, and I'll show you how bikes route either by taking the lane if they're comfortable with that approach, or utilizing the shared use path if that's their comfort level. And again, these in this concept, you can see that the sidewalk is going from a typical 5 or 6 foot sidewalk. It's a little hard to tell with these exhibits, but this is attempting to show that this is a 10-foot sidewalk or multi-use path through these areas up to the ramp where the bike lane begins again. So this is kind of an aerial view, and we're going to first look at northbound to eastbound on the multi-use path. So this is how a bike would circulate. Next, we'll look at what a bike would look like if they were to take the lane. Fairly straightforward with the right turn, not much difference in distance or convenience. If you're going right, going through isn't much difference. Let's take a look at what a left turn would look like, and then talk about an alternative that we've been discussing internally and with we briefly discussed, I believe, with the Transportation Commission. So if you're making a left turn as a cyclist and you want to use the multi-use path, this would be one of the possible routings, as you would exit onto the multi-use path, act as a pedestrian crossing, and around. You also could have the opportunity to cross left, use this crosswalk, come up to this crosswalk, and then go this way. So a much shorter path. So as a multi-use path adjacent to the roundabout, bicycles and pedestrians could go in two directions. One of the concepts that has been brought up is a one-way cycle path or a protected bike lane type of facility. And that's where we take the 10-foot sidewalk and separate it into 5 feet for pedestrians to walk in either direction and 5 feet for bicycles, but it would be in one direction only because 5 feet is not wide enough to go in two directions. So that's kind of a neat concept, and that could be something in the future if we had separated or protected facilities on any of these approaching roads. This intersection is kind of future-proof. It's built for that. And that's one of the concepts that's come up. Certainly would be nice to organize pedestrians and bikes on the multi-use path into their own spaces, but that convenience comes with a cost, and that's a much longer path because you always have to circulate in the same direction as a vehicle would. And this is in the travel lane. This is showing how a left turn would be accomplished for cyclists who wanted to take the lane. Of course, you wouldn't have to merge all at once. You could merge across some time, and moving from one lane to the second lane is certainly more difficult than going to one lane. In today's signal, you have to go 3 lanes. So we've actually made an improvement here over existing conditions. Here's a couple of concepts that have come up through our discussions with the bicycle and pedestrian advisory committees. This image on the left, switch my pointer to make it a little easier to see. This image on the left is called a protected intersection, and you can see protected or buffered or separated bike lanes coming up the ramps. There's actually a crosswalk between the pedestrian flow and the bike. This is pretty complicated pavement markings and probably not necessary at a roundabout, but what we do like about the protected intersection is this concept of maybe separating the pedestrian crossing with the bicycle crossing by using the green pavement markings, the green crosswalk markings for the bicycle portion of the crosswalk. This image on the right, I don't know if any of these are actually built. This comes from Massachusetts DOT. And we found this and have been discussing some of the concepts here. Again, separating bicycles from pedestrians. A lot of fairly complicated pavement markings. Not sure they have a lot of value, but these are some of the things that we're exploring as we go from where we're at right now in kind of a concept design into final design. Finally, get into some auto, bus, and truck operations. So for operational performance for autos, buses, and trucks, when operating within their capacity, roundabouts typically have lower overall delay than signalized and always stop controlled intersections of similar volumes. And we have done some of this analysis, or our consultant has done some of this analysis, and we have taken current traffic volumes and added 20%, 25% traffic to all approaches to see how well the roundabout will work. And we can still achieve level of service to D. A is the best, A, B, C, D are acceptable levels of service. So we can still achieve an acceptable level of service with the alternatives that we're going to present to you here in a couple more slides. But generally, a little bit better operations with a roundabout than a traffic signal. Ongoing operations and maintenance, typically lower operating life cycle costs. We don't have the traffic signal equipment to both operate, to program, and those have to be replaced periodically as they're computers in the field. So you lose all of those costs with the roundabout, so it's slightly cheaper in those regards. Approach roadways, again, we don't require lengthy turn lanes. You typically can bring in just the lanes that are on the road today. So if you have 2 northbound lanes, you typically just end up with 2 northbound lanes into the roundabout. You don't have to expand. And if you do, they're typically very short. Total lane count at this intersection today is 15 on all of those approaches, and we're reducing that to 10 with our preferred roundabout alternative. And there are greater right-of-way needs at the intersection quadrants themselves. The circle is bigger than the square, but on the approaches, you gain some on the approaches, but you lose some at the intersection itself. We did take a look at reducing lanes on both the northbound approach, which has that 2-lane entry, and we found that during peak periods, we had a greater than 1,000-foot queue, so vehicles were backing up past Greenlaw Lane was the prediction. And we also looked at reducing a lane eastbound because we have that separated yield right turn lane, and we had level of service of F and 1,500-foot queues, which I don't know how far 1,500 feet is on the ground, but it's a long ways back every morning. So we have optimized the number of lanes and are pretty happy with the concepts. We're very happy with the concepts that we're going to present to you here in a couple slides. Finally, we take a look at design vehicles. We look at buses and trucks. Here's an example of how we look at buses circulating through the roundabout. These roundabout designs that we're offering tonight for the 2 alternatives can accommodate full-size semi-trucks and full-size buses, either on the normal travel way or what we call the truck apron, which is this light gray color that circles the landscaped area in the middle of the roundabout. And with that, I think I'm transitioning back to Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeff. So just to revisit our existing conditions at the existing signal. As Jeff pointed out earlier, we're missing the pedestrian crossing of Cedar. Although there is a crossing, as he pointed out, to the west on Cedar Avenue. We've got the offset intersection legs for the east-westbound, and so there's some unique geometry to this particular intersection. And so these are our existing conditions. Back in November is when we kicked off the initial design on this project, and we've looked at well over a dozen different concepts of roundabouts, some circular, non-circular, single and double roundabouts with varying numbers of approach and exit lanes. And we've kind of worked this down to 2 alternatives. The first alternative is a pair of non-circular roundabouts, and our second one is a single non-circular roundabout. So the first one is our double roundabout. And Jeff, let's advance to the full colorized version. This just gives us an idea. Now we can see where sidewalks are and so on. So the things to point out here, the center islands, as you'll notice, are quite small. And let's focus on the northernmost center island at the moment. This entire center island is very similar to what we currently have in place at the Arrowhead and West intersection. It's a fully mountable center island. Any larger vehicles, buses, large trucks, trucks with trailers would have to drive over the center of this island to make the turn. The southern island, as you see, still has a little bit of green, and this is a small opportunity for some landscaping or beautification, but the rest of this would be mountable. If you'll notice this house on Lockett Road, south of Lockett, just to the east here, we were able to miss this home, and so we're not impacting the home itself, but there are still some significant impacts to this parcel. They currently have a driveway. As you can see, there's an RV that you can see parked in the side yard, and that side yard access would go away. As you can see, it conflicts with the pedestrian crossings and the bike lanes, exits, and so on. Certainly, some of the initial feedback that we've gotten on this concept is that it's significantly more complex. If you look at this, you can work your way through how a car or a bike or a pedestrian would go around or through this, but it is a bit more complex, at least at a first examination. There are some benefits, at least along the MEMS frontage. This may allow us to reduce the existing retaining wall that exists on that northwest corner, allowing us possibly to drop some portion of the sidewalk down to street level and still have some room for some expanded landscaping opportunities in this area. So this is our concept one. We call this our double roundabout. Moving on to our next concept. This one you'll recognize from some previous slides. This is a singular roundabout. It's non-circular, and we kind of massage the geometry to, reduce the impact that we're having. And really the first thing to point out here, and Jeff, you might as well move on to the colorized version again. The first thing to point out here is that we are cutting off the corner of this home on Lockett. So we would be impacting that single family residence dramatically. It would require us to purchase this home and relocate the residents. So that's certainly something that we do not take lightly, and we wanted to have an alternative to present and consider that did not require us going that far. So that's the first thing to point out here. Certainly, when you first look at this, the geometry is much simpler. We, at this point, as Jeff mentioned, we've had roundabouts in this town for a while. People are getting used to them, and this fits with that and is going to be a much more familiar situation. We have only 2 lanes on one approach, and that's our northbound 4th Street approach is 2 lanes, but all the other legs are single lanes, and that's where most criticism of roundabouts comes from, is some of the confusion when it comes to operation when there's multiple lanes merging and diverging and so on. And in this case, really, that's been minimized. As we mentioned earlier, that center island, the green portion there, is going to afford a much larger opportunity for beautification or character improvement. And we will certainly continue conversations based on whatever concept we ultimately select. There may be some options to improve, again, along that MEMS frontage. At the very least, we are showing that all of these multi-use paths are separated by a parkway, so that gives some buffer. This also reduces the likelihood of pedestrians or someone on a bike trying to cut through the center. It just kind of separates things and moves on. All right, next slide. So we took both of these alternatives and we considered them and scored them on multiple factors through a decision matrix. Some of these factors that we considered were safety, and we considered this for all modes, so pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles. We also considered operations, what kind of delay, what's the level of service that, again, all those modes, bikes, pedestrians, and vehicles are going to see. Jeff kind of alluded to some of the environmental factors and benefits of roundabouts. Most of the time, there's a general flow through a roundabout, so we don't have the stopping and idling, and we don't have the strong acceleration. So there's some significant environmental factors that kind of also go along with some of the operations and maintenance that Jeff just talked about before. One of the primary things that we were looking at was buildings and structure impact. Certainly, it's a big deal to impact someone's home and to possibly have to relocate them. Both of these considered the different amount of right-of-way impacts, what we would need. They have slightly different footprints, and certainly the single roundabout is going to have a larger footprint and would require us to purchase that entire residential property on the east side at this point. And then stakeholder feedback. We went to the Bicycle Advisory Committee, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and the Transportation Committee or Commission, and we worked through the full decision matrix, which was included for review. That's available with the agenda packet. And so we worked through and scored the 2 alternatives with those groups and got their feedback. And ultimately, I know it's no hidden secret at this point, but the single roundabout has scored highest. When we started this process, I will point out that we had actually scored these relatively equally, but through our stakeholder feedback and some additional meetings, we have bumped up the single roundabout as our current preferred alternative. Next slide. Which brings us to our next steps. As we mentioned when we kicked this off, we are looking to council today to provide some feedback and discussion and help us select this final design alternative. And once we're able to do this, the project will move into full design. As Jeff mentioned, we are currently, these are purely conceptual, so we'll move it to full design where we work to incorporate some of the feedback we've gotten as it relates to bike and pedestrian treatments and so on. We're anticipating this design phase is going to take most, if not all, of 2021. And at some point during this time, probably in late summer, early fall, we anticipate a public information meeting once we've got a bit more information on what this full design is going to look like. So we will be going back out to the neighborhood, whether that's through a virtual meeting or in person. We'll just have to see what kind of restrictions are in place later this year. Two things that have to happen this year in 2021 will be right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation. ADOT will not advertise the project until those two items have been taken care of. Right-of-way acquisition will require us to come back to City Council, and we do plan to re-engage with Pedestrian Bicycle Committee and Transportation Commission as we move through design to keep them updated on what we've been able to incorporate in our ultimate design. Once we get through and have everything, we've acquired the necessary right-of-way, ADOT will advertise the project. We're hoping to do this late 2021 or early 22 and ultimately be in construction in 2022. And at this point, Jeff and I are here to answer any questions you may have and help facilitate any discussion you may have. Our ultimate hope here is to get some feedback from council on preferred design alternatives so that we can go back to the designer and effectively let them move forward on all the design particulars. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you both for a very informative presentation. Councilmember Aslan has a comment.
Thank you. So, Jeremy and Jeff, you had me at the word roundabout. I hope it's no secret at this point that I'm a very big personal fan of roundabouts. I've always seen the appeal and the utility of them. It's really nice to hear that the conventional wisdom is catching up with that. I think the roundabouts that are all throughout Sedona and Chino Valley and the northern area of growing Prescott are all fantastic, and they just work so well, especially once the public gets to know how to use them a little bit. And I've long seen how they completely avoid head-on collisions. You tend to have sort of sideswipe or rear end stuff going on there, and that's a marketed improvement. The previous council will remember I mentioned this before when we originally had this conversation, but the new council might not know this. My daughter, as a pedestrian and a attendee of Mount Eldon Middle School, was actually hit by a car crossing the road there. I was called by the police, and it took me a while. It was a while until I got there before I really understood that she was okay. And so that was a nerve-wracking experience. And I know that that's not the only incident that's occurred out there, with 2 schools on the corners of that road. 3 schools, really, if you include Coconino Community College and the public library right there. Definitely a weird intersection, a lot of traffic, and a lot of pedestrian activity, and a lot of children going back and forth through there. So very much a fan of the concept idea of roundabouts. If I had my way, I would take out all of the traffic lights all the way up and down Milton and replace them with roundabouts. I'm sure, Jeff, you and Jeremy could have lots of fun debates about that, and a lot of sleepless nights thinking about it. But if I had my wand, that's what I would do. And I will tell you, I find the second option much more appealing, the single roundabout, versus what I have personally dubbed the figure 8 design concept. Something I'm sure you're avoiding using because that's not the way the traffic flows there, but that's what it looks like to me. I think it's unfortunate that we would have to use eminent domain to remove that one residence, although I think that it's something that we would have to do and have to consider. A couple questions for you, and these are kind of just popcorn questions. You can answer them in any order you want. I didn't catch whether or not anyone has spoken to the residents or the owner of that property yet. I'm curious to know if that has happened and what the response has been. I'm also just generally interested in what the overall carbon footprint is of a busy intersection with its variable traffic light enhancements and 24/7 operation, and what the net difference in the carbon footprint would be moving from having lights there to having a roundabout that doesn't really require much traffic control, automated traffic control. And then lastly, one thing that's definitely in the back of my mind here is how we beautify that space, that center landscaping. Very interested to see what would become of that. I would hope that we could turn that into some kind of amenity, maybe even involve the two schools that are on the corner there in maybe some design competition or something. I don't know. I know we have our own arts and beautification process that we go through as a city. Just thinking through that a little bit. It's a little early to be zeroing in on what kind of artistic elements we can put there. But those are my comments and questions. And if you need me to rephrase any of those questions, I'm happy to do so. Carbon footprint of an intersection. Have you spoken with the resident or owner? I don't know if that's the same or if that's a rental property. And early thoughts on art and beautification.
Sure, I can jump in. This is Jeff. Thank you for the questions. I can answer 2 of the 3. I'll have to get back to you on the third one. So for beautification, because this is federal highway safety improvement program funding, they don't fund beautification, but we've worked with our beautification folks and they're interested in whatever project we can deliver to them after it's built. You'll probably notice at Schweitzer and Turquoise, there's nothing in the circle yet, and that's because we're just turning it over to them in that project as well. So we sleeve for irrigation, work with them through design, but we just turn it over when we're done building the project. So that's what we'll do here as well. As far as contacting the neighbors, we've reached out to all of the neighbors, letting them know of these presentations. We've actually sat down with FUSD to talk to them about MEMS, and then the property owner that the whole house take. Bryce Doty and Jeremy and I sat down with him in December to go through all of this with him. He actually was able to attend the Transportation Commission meeting and provide some input to the commission. And we invited him tonight, and he very well may speak at public participation. I'm not sure if he's here with us tonight or not. We've had really good discussions about how the whole process works, fair offers, relocation, and all of that stuff. So we've talked all of that through with him, and I feel like we've had really good open conversations.
Are you able to share at this point what your thoughts are on where that conversation might be headed? In terms of their amenability to solutions.
Thank you. That's tricky. So I'd rather him speak for him. I'd rather Walter speak for himself, and hopefully he's on the line to talk. But the conversations have been very good. I definitely wouldn't characterize it as the residents are opposed to this. They're trying to understand the process at this point. So we've been, very transparent, walked through the timeline with him, but I wouldn't want to speak for him as far as he's ready to go or not ready to go in that regard. And then carbon footprint, that's a great question, and I bet we can model that. We didn't model that with the work we've done so far, but I think we can.
Well, yeah, even just the wattage, how much electricity is running through the system of a busy intersection in general. Maybe, I mean, I'd be very surprised if you could pull that information out of your pocket right now, but I am generally curious what the trade-off is and how we are accounting for that as we replace intersections with roundabouts. It's definitely something we should make note of.
I'm curious too, so I will dig into that and work with our designer and see if there's a general number or if we can we should be able to model this. Emissions modeling is fairly common for signalized intersections, and I would think for roundabouts as well.
And to be clear, I'm not talking about vehicle emissions. I'm referring to the energy input required to run traffic signals and all the other processes that are live and ongoing 24 hours a day.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah,
yeah, that I can almost add up in my head.
It's probably not a big net differential, right? But maybe it is, I don't know.
Yeah, so just to talk through that quickly, we've transitioned to LEDs on all of the pedestrian indications, on all the vehicle indications. So that's brought the power consumption way down. Sure. On all the traffic signal stuff. There's certainly some power involved in the computers that run the traffic signal. So that's kind of the traffic signal stuff that doesn't exist for the roundabout. And then a typical signalized intersection has 4 streetlights, luminaires. A roundabout's going to have probably 6 or 8. And so the power consumption is probably a wash or close to a wash when we get through all those components. Yeah, we like to illuminate each approach and exit. So you end up with 8 luminaires instead of just 4, 1 over each crosswalk.
Okay, well, thank you very much for helping me think through some of those concepts a little bit. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman and Councilmember Aslan. I will mention I actually just pulled up a recent study that was done in Kansas State University, and that on average roundabouts show a 33% reduction in carbon monoxide emissions and 46% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions. So just throwing out there some random general numbers for the studies. I do want to check with Ms. Fobar. Do we have any public participation on this item before we continue with the council discussion?
Mayor, we have not had any public comment requests for this item.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fobar. I just want to make sure on that, particularly with the property owner. Councilmember Sweet has a comment.
Thank you, and thank you for the very informative presentation. I was in Sedona yesterday, and driving through the roundabout certainly gave me some pause, and I was questioning mostly the crosswalks. I've had 2 boys go through Mems and Pointe there, and also I was a crossing guard down the way at Thomas years ago, so I can see the necessity for the roundabout, and I'm excited about this project. I'm just questioning, how do we do the public outreach to the students that will be using the roundabout? Can we talk to the schools? Can we talk to the teachers? What does that look like? And is that in the plan down the road? And also the blinking lights for the pedestrians crossing, would that be also something to include in the plan?
Thank you for those questions. So we're very early. We haven't even really started design. We're just at concept level. So we haven't developed any of that coordination with the school district yet. I mean, we've talked to them about the property impacts, briefly talked to them about crossing guards or pedestrian beacons, flashing lights beacons, the push beacons. Those are kind of the details of the pedestrian beacons are something that we'll get into with final designer as we work through final design, continue to have discussions with the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. They're not standard to install at a roundabout, but with this location, with the schools, it may be something that's a really good idea here. We'll certainly put conduit sleeves in so that we can put them in the future if we end up deciding not to install them. They're a pretty big cost if you think about adding, one to each crossing. So we have 5, 7, 9, add 9 new devices. It's more things to maintain. So we want to just, engineer it so we're doing it where we need it, but not where we don't need it. But it's definitely something that we've talked about and will be a part of the design as we move forward. In regards to public outreach, yeah, we plan to do some public outreach that's a little bit broader when we get closer to opening the roundabout with the schools. So I think we have options. We've just been talking through it because we're not quite there yet, but we can certainly reach out to the schools. There could be flyers or emails, however the current communications working at MEMS and PDH and Pine Forest. I think one of the most effective things is just to be out there when you first open it and school starts. People like me, people like Jeremy, some school district people, and just talking through it with the kids, teaching them how to safely cross and operate in a roundabout. So I think we have a couple of different options. We didn't spell it out today because, again, we're just way at the beginning of the design process, checking in on, do you like 2 roundabouts or 1?
And I don't know if I answered that, but I do like the single roundabout. And thank you for all of the information. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Daggett.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Bauman. I would like to echo Councilmember Aslan's enthusiasm for roundabouts. I love them too. And I use the roundabout at Schweitzer and Turquoise every day, and it has made a huge difference to that intersection and the wait times that cars approaching Schweitzer from Turquoise used to have to have. So I'm very enthusiastic about this one, and this is a particularly tricky and confusing intersection, and I'm just very excited to see this get built. So if I'm understanding correctly, ADOT is in control of the construction and the budget, and the city is responsible for anything above the grant amount. So I'm wondering, what kind of oversight will the city have to ensure that we don't have unnecessary cost overruns? And also, when the roundabout was built at the intersection of Schweitzer and Turquoise, the traffic was closed from where Turquoise approaches Schweitzer for a long time. And so I'm just wondering if what you all have thought about what you're going to do with all of the traffic needing to use this intersection during the construction. And I would say that I also support the single roundabout. So my 2 questions really are, how are we going to oversee any potential cost overruns? And have you developed some sort of a plan for dealing with traffic during construction? Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you. We have learned a lot through this Highway Safety Improvement Program with working on the Schweitzer and Turquoise project. I'll start with maybe the construction, and well, they're kind of intertwined, the possible cost overruns and construction. So with Schweitzer and Turquoise, it was a similar arrangement. We applied for the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant award, and then because it's this federal HSIP program, ADOT administers the program. And so ADOT assigns a project manager, they hire the consultant team, they hire the contractors, they do all of the reviews in the field. Something we learned through that process is that we needed to be a lot more involved from the very beginning. We were involved in Schweitzer Turquoise, but not to the level of detail that we're involved with this project. And I think that's going to really help steer us in the right direction and maintain those costs as we go through. We've got a really good we've got a really good design budget and designer on board. We have a roundabout expert, and we're having, frequent meetings with the designer to this so far, and we'll continue to have them. It's kind of a shared responsibility. I mean, the designer and consultant aren't even on the call tonight. Jeremy and I we took the project, have run it through this public process and through City Council tonight, and then we'll hand it back to them with clear direction on where we're headed. So I feel like we're more involved than we were last time and have a better feel for the whole program. The Schweitzer Turquoise had some utility conflicts it's fairly complicated what happened, but there was utility conflicts on top of utility conflicts and unidentified things that really fouled the construction phasing up for that project. It went for many seasons. We definitely had a lot of problems in the field. There's no guarantee that won't ever happen again, but we also have some ideas on how to mitigate that going forward. As far as construction phasing, roundabouts are tough to build. You often need to close one of the streets and detour one of the streets. We were very careful with Schweitzer and Turquoise when we did that to miss holidays. We tried to miss when school was in session, and that's certainly going to be a big consideration here. That's quite a ways out, but we are definitely prepared for those conversations based on our experiences at Schweitzer and Turquoise. So this is a busier location. It also has really difficult detours like Schweitzer and Turquoise did. And we should expect when we build, whatever summer we end up building it, that we will have to close legs one at a time at least. But we're preparing for that, and we will continue to prepare for that as we go through design. We're very early right now, so I don't have great answers, but I can just tell you from our experience what we know we're going to do moving forward. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Mr. Baumann. Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I too support the single roundabout, which I think is option B4. I sat through the meetings with the Transportation Commission, and we actually went into more detail at those meetings than we are tonight as far as rankings and stuff. And remember the one chart that showed that the single roundabout gets a rating of 74 and the double gets a rating of 68. I think it's actually more towards the single than those numbers would indicate, because my recollection of the numbers is some of the things that were very important, like safety, for instance, were put up against lesser important things. So I guess my point is that I feel even more strongly for the single roundabout than those numbers would indicate. I do have one question. If you look at what's on the screen right now, the crosswalk coming in from, on the north leg, you see if a person goes across, yes, right there, they go across and they get into the median, but they don't immediately go right across like they do on the other three legs. They have to kind of make a jog, which will make them kind of slow down and think it through. I notice on a lot of crosswalks, for instance, the one on Route 66, just east of Milton, up by the Standard, that they do the same thing. That, I think in some cases, if they don't do that, pedestrians are inclined to just walk across one lane and just keep walking and just expect the cars to stop, especially if there's a beacon. And so I'm suggesting that we might consider putting a jog in the east leg, the south leg, and the west leg. So just something to think about. I know this is all preliminary, but that might actually add some safety with a very minor increase in cost. So anyway, thank you, and keep on keeping on.
Thank Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Salas. Oh, wait, my apologies. Councilmember Shimoni had a comment before Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Mayor, and no worries. Thank you, Jeff and Jeremy, and Mr. Rick Barrett and City Manager and the entire team. I'm so glad that this is being brought before Council and that we have the opportunity to weigh in on this and communicate our thoughts. And I'm just so glad that we are really prioritizing the movement and flow of our pedestrians here. Obviously, I think you know that I'm going to be an advocate for separated lanes so that folks who are not like you and myself, Jeff, who are going to take over the whole road on our bikes can get around. I like what you said about the alternative transportation of a cyclist to kind of cut left and then go north rather than go up to the right and then around. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the different things that you all are exploring. I like the idea of engaging with the students in the beautification of this or any of this. I just think that with the school right there, it's a great opportunity to support students and partner with them and empower them through the process. Yeah, I think that my big concern is just the crossings of the pedestrians and making sure that that's very visible and safe, whether it's those little flashing lights that we see by the standard or on Butler or whatever it is. We can talk more about that. I know that we're just in the preliminary stages. I'm totally cool with one roundabout versus two, and I'll add to the praise that, you know, being from Israel, Israel has a roundabout at every corner, and they're great. And I think they work very well. And I know we have a few of them here in the state, and I'm glad to see us building upon that locally. And then lastly, as this does progress, a similar outreach campaign, I think, you know, with good quality video work, showing the process and showing what it is we're doing, that could also be empowering and educational, will be helpful. Jeff, quick question. I know that we talked about the bicycle lanes kind of going from on street to off streets. Is with the new, that's it, yeah. With the new design standards that is working through the public process, that is through the active transportation master plan, will basically that 10-foot sidewalk, that Foots Trail, that will continue over time along Cedar, correct? And also 4th Street.
Thank you. Yeah, I did take a look, and 4th Street and Cedar, I believe, are secondary routes on that map that we're familiar with, the dark red and the light red map. So primary routes are kind of over by Milton. You're familiar with the bikeways map. So yeah, bikeways, secondary bikeways are mapped out on both Cedar and 4th. So yes, that would eventually be either the double foots concept or parallel cycle tracks. I'm not quite sure what concept it would end up with, but the roundabout kind of already builds that, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's future proofing, if you will.
I love it. I really do. It makes me really excited. And I wonder, you know, in the short term, and I know we've talked a little bit about this, Jeff, you know, until we have those double foots on both sides of Cedar and also 4th Street, I wonder if this is where the flaps go as like a temporary, you know, Band-Aid approach to kind of creating that separation so that a cyclist is not adjacent and more invulnerable to a vehicle, and that there is some more accountability on the vehicle to stay focused on the road. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to jump in and pick those corridors that would take the flaps at this point. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have that conversation with Martin, with you, with the Bicycle Advisory Committee on their priority for, you know, kind of a first installation of the temporary barriers to separate bike lanes from travel lanes. Yeah, this would be a cool spot to do it. There are many places. So I'm not going to commit Martin to that tonight, but I think it'd be a great conversation as part of the roundabout. That'd be a neat thing to do.
Well, I'm happy to commit Martin tonight, but that's just me. You know, I knew I was putting you on the spot with that, but I'm just really grateful that staff brought this before council, and I invite future conversations on future infrastructure projects like this be aired out publicly with council like this. So thank you. Very excited about the plans, and and looking forward to seeing this progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Councilmember Salas, sorry for the order mix-up there. Right in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you, Team Flagstaff, for an excellent presentation. I too support a single roundabout as the preferred alternative, considering multiple factors, safety for all modes of transportation, pedestrian, bicyclist, transit, and privately owned vehicles. And then we have the environmental factors, buildings and structures impacts, right-of-way needs, and of course, stakeholder feedback and more. I too go through the Turquoise and Schweitzer Canyon roundabout on a daily basis. And every now and then I would encounter some drivers who are not quite familiar on how to go around the roundabout. Either they just stop fully and wait for everyone, or they just zoom to the roundabout. So I think eventually, some kind of a video on, the right-of-way and how to go round the roundabout will be helpful to both to drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. I had a question here. So when looking at all the alternatives in the agenda packet, I did notice that there was at least some discussion regarding, I'm trying to pull it up here, the page number. Yeah, it's page 482 of the packet, that it looked like there was a option for a single roundabout, which I will say that I am much more in favor of a single than a double. I think that adds complication that will may detract from the safety of the, one of the main purposes of this change. But there is on this alternative B3 that it said it has no residential impact for a single roundabout. And I understand that I saw that there were some concerns about the ability of semi-trucks or something to that effect to get through there. I was wondering if you could speak to that. My main concern is I prefer the single roundabout, but I'm always very, very concerned about people's private property, and if there's a way to minimize that at the same time as getting the single roundabout, I would like to pursue that option. So is there anything that staff could maybe mention about the B3? Is that a complete impossibility to put that forth, or yeah, I'm just wondering how we can do this without taking out that residential home.
Thank you, Mayor. I've pulled up the memo. There were so many alternatives I couldn't remember which one. B3. Let me slide the memo over onto my screen and see if our technology holds together. Can you see?
Yeah, and that's why I was a little confused, is because I have one in the packet that's on agenda packets page 482 of the packet that provides a B3 option that says no residential impacts.
And I don't have the packet open in front of me. Maybe Jeremy can help me. This is labeled B3 from the technical memo, alternative B3, and you can see it also it goes through the home, which most of the alternative, I thought all of the alternatives with a single lane that have speed control. So one of the things that we really struggled with was obviously we wanted to avoid this private property impact. But we also didn't want to see vehicle paths where they're almost straight through, where we didn't have any deflection to slow people down. We're trying to control speeds. Remember, conflict points and controlling speeds are big critical issues And so if you move the circle one way, I mean, that's why we end up with not a circle anymore, because we're trying to balance truck and bus movements, circulating elements for the speed control. There's a bunch of things about angles. We could talk about roundabouts for hours. I don't think, Jeremy, do you have that exhibit? Am I pulling up the wrong one?
I am trying to pull it up. It is one of the hidden slides that we have. It's
okay.
The second slide. I think it's 32.
Let's give me a moment here. Let me see if I can exit out of the presentation. Slide 32?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm ready. Oh, I thought it would open up in 32. My apologies, I'm gonna zip through it. There we go.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking at here, was that the one on the left looks like it wouldn't require the building to be taken down to be able to do it. And they would just basically take out their RV parking. Is that true? Or, yeah, I'm just kind of curious about that.
So this light gray line, which is a little bit hard to see, but that's the edge of the sidewalk. And so if we provided a sidewalk without a parkway, without the 5-foot parkway, we'd be right under the eave of the house. So we, yes, technically don't hit the house. But as I was mentioning, because this was one of the considerations, this westbound movement is almost straight across. Mm-hmm. And so we lose our speed control on that element. You see that, I mean, you can see the difference northbound. You have to curve way out and around to get to your desired. Westbound is almost, it's a curve, but it's a very high speed curve compared to what we're looking for. So we're not sure we actually missed the house, but it's very, very close, and we lose speed control for that westbound movement. Or the two things I remember from this one is kind of a pop quiz.
Yes, mm-hmm. And so, yes, it was the speed control, safety, and then the fact that we're so close to that home, we're effectively in his living room, even if we're not quite in it. So it was still a pretty severe impact to that residential property, even if we didn't actually have to take the home.
Okay, and then the spin-off question with that is we're going to be responsible for the additional dollars required to put this in. I'm just wondering if we're going to have to take a full property, or not take, pay and purchase for fair market value. Is there any estimates on how much that would take if we're taking the whole property as opposed to a section of it? Yeah. So I know this is real early in the phase, so those numbers may not have been up, but just the questions I'm thinking about while looking at this.
We don't. Bryce, if Bryce is on the line, he may be able to offer some 30,000 foot view numbers at this point.
Generally, good evening again. What's if this is the design alternative and this is the one that we choose, and it does look like a full acquisition of the parcel is required, what will happen is we will get an appraisal, and we will have to pay. The appraisal starts a negotiation process to determine fair market value. But then on top of that, you basically, since we are using federal dollars for this, we follow the Uniform Code, which requires us to find a replacement residence. So even if the appraisal comes in at a certain dollar, we actually have to go hire a relocation person to find suitable alternatives to what this house is. And if there is a differential between what the appraisal is and what the fair value of a replacement home is, we'll have to pay that also. So, we have to find a suitable replacement house. And so browsing on Zillow, in the neighborhood for something for the same comps is going to be what we're kind of on the hook for.
Okay, so we're gonna have to deal with that cost regardless of these two possibilities here. We would have to acquire the entire lot.
If so, for alternative B3, it depends on if that's deemed a full acquisition. So that will come out in the appraisal process. If when we appraise it, if that was the design we would pick, if they said that this is too damaging to the parcel to make it unusable, they might require us to do a full acquisition.
Okay, that's good to know. I just am always concerned with people's private property, and I'd love to hear from the owner at some point, but I'm really glad that you all have reached out to the individual and are including them in the process and explaining it to them. I think that's extremely important if that's the route that is going to be necessary. So I guess that in total, I will actually echo what others have said, which I think a single roundabout is preferable in this circumstance, and then we can, work out the details as we move forward. So I think that gives adequate direction unless otherwise noted, and we can move on to our next discussion item. Chat box just froze for a second. So.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Sarah Langley. Jessica's going to be displaying the slideshow for me. And we'll just wait for that to go into present mode, and then we can get started. Might have a bit of a delay here. There we go. All right, so good evening, Mayor and Council. As I mentioned, my name is Sarah Langley, and I'm a management analyst. I'm also joined tonight by Todd Medeska, our state lobbyist. As we are getting further into the legislative session, we would like to provide you with an overview of some bills that will be of interest to Council. So I'll first cover several bills that we think Council would support, and then based on legislative priorities, I'll go over several bills that stand in opposition to those priorities. So to get started, this slide shows several bills that support the legislative priorities of Council and would likely benefit the City of Flagstaff. Senate Bill 1177 creates a tax credit against individual and corporate income taxes for processing qualifying forest products within Arizona. So this is in line with Council's forest health priority and could help support a biofuels industry in northern Arizona. Next, Senate Bill 1377. This bill would provide cities as well as other governments, nonprofits, and businesses with an affirmative defense against a negligence claim that arose during the state of emergency declared by the governor, as long as the city or other entity can show that it adopted and implemented reasonable policies related to public health. So this would protect the city and other reasonable actors from negligence lawsuits without providing blanket immunity. House Bill 2127 appropriates $10 million from the general fund in fiscal year 2022 to the Arizona State Parks Heritage Fund. So the Heritage Fund was eliminated during the Great Recession and was reestablished 2 years ago. And so this is an effort to put funding into that Heritage Fund. And then these monies could, of course, be used to support our state parks, trails, open spaces, and historic and cultural sites, which is part of our legislative priorities this year. Moving on, the Kavanaugh short-term rentals bill is similar to the Brophy-McGee bill from last year, if you recall that one that passed out of the Senate, but then got stuck due to COVID. So this bill would allow cities to restrict short-term rentals to specific zoning districts or limit the overall number of short-term rentals, but it would not allow cities to prohibit short-term rentals altogether. So overall, it does provide us with some valuable tools if it were to pass. And then lastly, on our recommended support slide, we have House Bill 2562, which establishes an affordable housing tax credit in the state of Arizona and requires the Arizona Department of Housing to issue at least $8 million in tax credits in any calendar year. And I believe this is the bill that our housing director, Sarah Dar, mentioned last week as being potentially helpful. So as I mentioned, we think these bills are in line with Council's legislative priorities, and with your approval, we will move forward with supporting these bills. Next slide, please. Just waiting for that transition. Okay, so on this slide, we've listed bills that oppose or do not align with Council priorities. Starting with Senate Bill 1406, this bill repeals aircraft registration fees and license taxes, and the estimated direct loss of this bill would be around $500,000 collectively for cities and towns throughout the state. Additionally, the State Aviation Fund would get less funding, and we use these monies for matching funds for FAA grants. So overall, this bill would have a negative financial impact for the city as well as our airport specifically. Next, we have two bills related to the authority of the Arizona Corporation Commission. So if you recall, several weeks ago, the council signed a letter of opposition opposing a House and Senate mirror bill that would take away the Arizona Corporation Commission's authority to pass regulations related to electricity generation. And the two bills shown on the slide aim to also limit the ACC's authority, but in different ways. So Senate Bill 1459 would remove the administrative review exemption that applies to the ACC agency actions. So basically, ACC decisions would be subject to court review instead of them being able to make those decisions by themselves. Additionally, House Bill 2737 stipulates that at the request of a member of the legislature, the Attorney General must investigate any decision made by the ACC that the lawmaker alleges is beyond its authority. And then if that is upheld by the Supreme Court, 10% of the commission's operating budget could be withheld until that decision is remedied. So we thought that these bills go in line with the bill that you earlier opposed. However, we would like to note that the corporation is remaining neutral on these bills, so that does make it a bit difficult to voice opposition to the legislature. And then lastly, on our recommend opposed page, we have House Bill 2551. And this bill would allow an individual to bring a deadly weapon, such as a gun, into municipal buildings if they held a concealed carry permit. And this also represents an unfunded mandate for cities and towns. This is the same guns in public buildings bill that we've seen for 3 or 4 years. So it's back again this year. And to wrap up this slide, these bills we do think are in opposition to Council's legislative priorities. And so with your approval, we will go ahead and oppose these bills. Next slide, please. So to wrap up, we wanted to bring your attention to Mirror Bills 1797 and 2772. These are related to fantasy sports betting and event wagering. So one of these bills was heard in committee last week, and the other will be heard this week. And these could have a potentially significant impact on our region and our county. Provisions of these bills include allowing in Arizona betting on professional and college sports, both at tribal casinos as well as sites owned by pro sports teams. And then the bills would also allow online betting and fantasy sports wagering. So the bill is quite complex and technical. It's over 50 pages long. So we will be coming back to you at a future council meeting with a more in-depth overview of the bill and potential impacts to our area specifically. So that is all I had for you tonight. We wanted to keep it short and sweet, but as I said, Todd and I are here to answer any questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Langley. Council, comments, questions regarding these bills? Councilmember McCarthy.
I agree with the staff recommendations on the support and oppose list.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Todd, for being with us. I, too, support the list. And my only question was in regards to the short-term rentals. I'm really intrigued about the zoning. I did read the report or the update from the league, but I guess I'm just excited. So I guess I'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But I am intrigued to learn more about what that means and how that works. And I know a lot of people are too, though.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. I know the league recently introduced an amendment to that bill, which kind of specifies what are they talking about in terms of reasonable zoning ordinances. So I can go ahead and send you that amendment if you'd be interested to read it. And we will continue to track that through the process.
Thank you, Sarah. And yes, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Let me, chime in here. I am okay with supporting the all except for the SB 1377 regarding the civil liability regarding the pandemic. I have some serious concerns, especially with how strong of language it is in here, that it does seem like, I know not de jure, but de facto, it seems pretty giving immunity to healthcare institutions and providers for an extended amount of time, whether, as it says in here, whether it's directly or indirectly related to the pandemic. We have had issues, not necessarily here, but across the state, where we have situations where they were only giving an N95 mask to nurses one per week. We have situations where there is potential negligence and malpractice and others, and I think this goes way too far to protecting those who may have some faults or malpractice incidents regarding our, even if it's somewhat related to the health pandemic. I could see really a lot of stuff getting lopped in here as the indirectly related to the pandemic due to staffing, due to equipment. For example, our sterilization machine was being used for pandemic purposes, so we couldn't properly sterilize the equipment that we were using for you. I'm just throwing that example out there. I'm not saying that I'm aware of that situation again, but I am very concerned that this gives way too much protection, and I'd like to hear council's opinion on it, but that is the only one out of this list that I have very big concerns whether to follow the staff recommendations regarding, or rather Councilmember Aslan asked, are we supposed to provide direction on the support opposed list? Yes, and I will go to Councilmember Salas with a comment. Councilmember Salas?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hear your perspective on your reservation about the Senate Bill 1377. So I would kind of lean on Ms. Langley and Mr. Madexia. This bill mandates that all businesses must adhere to CDC guidelines, and CDC guidelines have specific guidelines to healthcare facilities, healthcare providers, and then other industries like manufacturing or the service sector.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. I can just read a portion of the bill that I think might answer your question, if that's all right. So the bill states that a person or provider is presumed to have acted in good faith if the person or provider adopted and implemented reasonable policies related to the public health pandemic. So that is how the bill kind of addresses the issue that you mentioned.
Thank you, Ms. Langley. So it doesn't have specific language about the CDC guidelines and specific sector guidelines.
It does not, no.
Okay, thank you. So I would support staff recommendations with respect to the position of the list of supporting legislations and opposing recommendations, but I would also request again staff and Mr. Medeksha to give us some to review and give us some recommendation about House Bill 2418, which is the Economic Development Improvement Program as proposed by Representative Tim Dunn. You know, I understand this can be a useful tool to attract capital and investment in rural regions like Flagstaff and Northern Arizona. Please and thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Mr. Medeksha, did you have a comment on that before I go to Councilmember Sweet?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have much to answer for that. I put that in before Councilwoman Salas started speaking. Councilwoman, we will definitely look at that bill and get back to you on it. Regarding the indemnity bill that is being discussed, you know, Mr. Mayor, the bill doesn't absolve anyone of negligence. It doesn't dissolve anyone of you know, not sterilizing equipment. It simply absolves people of saying if you take reasonable precautions, folks can't sue you for catching the coronavirus, and it's been sought after for a couple years at the state level. And so I you know, will be glad to take whatever council's direction is. And with that, I'll be quiet and just listen again.
Thank you, Mr. Medeksha. So, but don't they already have these types of, you know, laws to protect individuals for being sued due to, well, yeah, it seems like it's adding an extra layer on to the situation. Aren't there already laws in place to be able to prevent that from happening? Maybe not related to the pandemic specifically, but.
You know, Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. I'm not an attorney, and I won't pretend to say whether or not that exists. I think that what I have experienced over the last 18 months, 2 years now, has been that private sector and public sector both have sought this indemnity bill. Originally, the governor said, well, they're going to pass it in the United States Congress. Congress said, no, we're going to leave it up to the states. And so now what's happening is this bill is moving through the process. We thought it was important that we bring it to your attention. You know, and so we wait for your direction. I think your point's well taken, is that, you know, is this overkill? Maybe. I'm not one to say whether it is or not. I would think the city would be something supportive of it, but I certainly hear your concerns and respect those.
Thank you, Mr. Medeksha. Councilmember Sweet has a comment.
I do support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sweet. Vice Mayor Daggett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Ms. Langley, for putting up with all of my emails and always responding with such great and thorough facts when I'm asking you about what's going on at the legislature. And I'd like to say that I also support staff's recommendations. Thank you.
Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you. Just weigh in quickly to say I support the recommendations as are, and I appreciate the hard work that went into putting the list together.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Aslan. I think that gives clear direction from to city staff and Mr. Medeska, unless otherwise noted. All right, well, now we are down to agenda item 12, council liaison reports. Council, would you like me to just do roll call and see where everyone is at here? If you have anything to report from your liaison positions, I guess I'll start in reverse order. Councilmember Sweet, do you have anything to report with your liaison position?
I do. I don't know if you've been downtown, but there is a new mural that the beautification team worked on, and it's by the sweet shop in the alleyway, and it's just a great addition to the alley, and I appreciate their hard work. And I'm getting ready for my first water commission, I believe tomorrow or Thursday, I can't remember, it's on my calendar, but I'm very excited to start with that. And that's really all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sweet. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the only thing I have to report on is the CJCC group that met last week. And specifically, they hired a agency to come in and help lead us through this current gap period where leadership has been shifting at the county level, especially leadership around the CJCC and with the CJCC. And what they're looking to do is streamline the team and make the team more efficient. So I might not be part of that core group for much longer, since we're looking to bring down the number of executive members from 20 plus people to 9, I believe it is. And us elected officials didn't make the short list. So the core team will be talking about this again in about a month, and we'll see where we go. But regardless of the direction, I support what the team needs to do, and I will stay involved, and will support the efforts that are yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Councilmember Salas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, I attended the Airport Commission meeting as a council liaison. The commission began discussion on the second parking lot, which the council approved last year. So they're looking at, some options for different fees, and also a 3-hour free parking for pickup and drop off. Also, they've discussed the electric charging stations, which will be near the terminal to help with quick charges for those dropping off and picking up. And then as the city's representative for ECONA, the Economic Collaborative of Northern Arizona, I had the opportunity to go on a tour with the Miss Gail Jackson, our CEO of ECONA, with John Saltonstall, our business retention and expansion manager, along with the Coconino County Workforce Development Board, of which I'm also a member of the new, let me make sure I have the company name correct, the New Life Forest Products. So this company purchased the old SCA tissue site in Belmont and turned it into an indoor lumber sawmill and manufacturing of wood products, and adding 200 new jobs in the region. And also I want to do a shout out to and props to our job creation incentive program for making a new company happen to invest in Flagstaff. This company is called Catalyst Space Technologies. So they're a new R&D team into aerospace and aviation, and they are going to create 31 new jobs, and they're in contract negotiations with NASA and U.S. military departments. So kudos to and congratulations and welcome to Catalyst Space Technologies. They are now located at the NASET building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Councilmember McCarthy.
I think the only thing I have to report this week is that I attended the pedestrian committee meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Aslan.
Nothing to report right now.
Excellent. Vice Mayor. Vice Mayor Daggett, do you have anything to report?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I was joking.
I'm sorry. Take a moment.
Yes, I just wanted to remind everyone that the public process is beginning for the new housing plan, and staff is looking to collect contact information from people who would like to be kept in the loop about upcoming meetings and so forth. So I'm hoping that lots of people will get involved and give their input. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I have nothing to report at this time. So we are down to our agenda item 13, our future agenda item requests, in particular item A, request by Councilmember Salas to place on a future agenda a discussion about a citywide comprehensive cost recovery policy. Councilmember Salas, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I have submitted this cost recovery proposed comprehensive citywide policy on cost recovery as a key component to maintaining the city's financial resilience, equitably priced offerings in terms of services and facilities and programs, and identifying core programs, facilities, and services. So cost recovery policy is built upon a very logical foundation, using the understanding of who is benefiting from the service to determine how that service should be paid for. I've done a quick research, and there's some cities and government agencies who have adopted some kind of cost recovery policy. The city of Tucson has a cost recovery in its comprehensive financial policy in terms of user fee and service charges. The city of Phoenix has cost recovery, including direct operation and maintenance expenses and capital that's articulated in its general budget and financial policies. The City of Mesa has a cost recovery policy for fee-supported services when it comes to adjusting fees and charges. And then the United States Department of Interior Bureau of Land Management has some cost recovery fee schedule for the public for providing information to the public. And of course, closer to our jurisdiction is the Coconino County of Parks and Recreation Department has a cost recovery policy when it comes to providing programs, recreation programs, and offering facilities. And I'm thankful to have been part of that team when the cost recovery policy was vetted and approved in 2013. So going back to the city, for our city, cost recovery policy can be interfaced with priority-based budgeting. If you recall, in our recent budget retreat, there's a scoring measure for recovery within the budget development and monitoring software. So we can use the same software in reviewing basic program attributes for data gathering and analysis. So cost recovery is directly related to resource allocation. This policy tool will provide accountability, transparency, and guidance for allocating resources and assigning fees. And it utilizes a benefits filter. It answers the question, who benefits from the service, and how much that service costs and who will pay for that service. So, and I have more and tons of information about cost recovery to share if this proposal gets at least 2 council support to move forward with an in-depth discussion. Thank you.
Mayor, you are muted.
Thank you. Apologies. Just said, Councilmember Salas, thank you for the research you put into this and how well thought out it is. Councilmember Shimoni, I believe, has a comment, so I'll refer to him.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, thank you, Councilmember Salas, for your work on this. I do support this moving forward. I'll keep it simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. I also support moving this forward. Do we have any further comments or questions from Councilmember Sweet?
And I would like to see this move forward. Thank you.
And Vice Mayor?
And now my dog is barking. I'm having a lot of technical difficulties this evening. I would also like to see it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, well, I think that gives adequate direction for staff. Without any further comments or questions, we are now down to agenda item number 14, which is our city manager report. Yeah, I guess city manager, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. This last report was because it was moved from a previous council meeting. It's a report that now covers about 4 weeks worth of miscellaneous updates. I want to, and some of the updates may be slightly dated because of that, but nevertheless, they are there for your reading enjoyment. I want to thank Deputy City Manager Shannon Anderson for her assistance. This was very much a collaborative effort. Shannon provided a lot of content to that report for you, and appended to the report is the monthly capital improvements update, always a good read with maps and charts and so forth, photos. So with that, before we call out one item for some quick discussion, I guess it would be appropriate to ask if you have any questions, and either I or Shannon will attempt to answer.
Council, do we have any questions at this time? All right. Well, I think. Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, for keeping us up to date to everything important going on within our city departments. I'm just curious to know when we can have a future discussion about the city's reentry plan, considering that we have tonight we have moved to the moderate level of the recession plan, and then with vaccinations now getting more vaccines and having it available to priorities 1A, B, and I believe we got an email from our deputy city manager that all city employees now are eligible to get the vaccine. So I am enthusiastic to have a future discussion on our re-entry plan with respect to our city facilities, especially the athletic facilities and fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. We chatted at length about COVID updates this morning and specific to the reentry plan. To be brief, it is coming your way next week. We will have a few talking points identified. We heard from Council over recent presentations that there's a desire for us at the staff level to be fairly brief on the statistical updates, getting right to the point on where things are with the pandemic, and perhaps identify the talking points that are timely for Council to consider. And that is exactly what we are endeavoring to do. I do not want to steal the thunder from Shannon Anderson, who will be presenting next week, along with Rose Tohi. You'll be getting some updates, yes, but we will talk a little bit more at length about the reentry plan, Councilmember Salas, and there will be some suggestions. And just to give you some snippets of what we will be bringing forth, as we have all been reading the emails, there is a strong desire to have dialogue about field sports, outdoor kid sports, youth sports. And we have some ideas that we'll be presenting to Council next week with respect to that. We will talk with respect to whatever we can share on the vaccination updates and related topics. So thank you for raising that, Councilmember Salas. It will be before you next week. Stay tuned on that. If I may then, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said thank you, City Manager.
Oh, sure, thank you.
Go right ahead if you have more.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, you know, a while back, and this goes back to the last very big storm that we had that deposited snow over a 4 or 5 day period. There were queries about the city's operations and specific to, you know, the berms and that sort of thing. So in the manager's report, and again, this is a bit of a dated part, but it's not entirely dated because here we are still having more snow events, thankfully, but nothing like what happened a few weeks back. But there is a narrative about that storm in particular, and then a few pages in, it's entitled Berm Summary, and there is a nice narrative there coming from courtesy of our Streets Department and Public Works Division, the Streets Division of that, or section rather, pardon me, about the best practices that are now being employed, some of the challenges that come along, of course, with having so many driveways, over 27,000 driveways, to put a number to it, within our community, and the need to clearly open our streets and arterials for traffic and the resulting issues with residential berms and commercial berms. So I think you have in the report a pretty nice narrative. I am not going to read it to you or belabor all of it. I just wanted to call it out for discussion and questions. Both Andy Bertelson and Scott Overton are here to give you in-depth responses to the questions or comments that you may have. But with that, this is an item that we wanted to allow opportunity for dialogue. And with that, I will open it up for any such dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Do we have any questions regarding the berms or anything else related to the City Manager report? And thank you to Mr. Overton and to Mr. Bertelson for their review of the berms and the policies. I appreciate that because I know we have gotten quite a few emails regarding it. Councilmember Shimoni has a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Manager, for the report and the capital improvement update. Excellent report and a lot of information. A quick question for Mr. Bertelsen and Mr. Overton. First of all, thank you both, and to your teams, thank you all for your hard work in this winter time. I remember a few months ago myself asking Scott, if we're going to have much of a winter, and he said it's coming, and so it definitely hit. And it might not be like the winters in the past, but we definitely had a good amount of snow the past month. So I think the team handled it well, and I'm grateful for that. Scott, my question is in regards to the cinders along the main artery hierarchy, for the travel, like along Butler, San Francisco, 66. Is there plans to address those cinders of which are in the bicycle lanes prior to spring?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Scott Overton, Public Works Street Section Director, and thank you, City Manager Clifton, for the brief introduction to snow operations. If you haven't figured it out, for both Andy and I love talking snow operations, and we could be here till the wee hours of the morning, but it's a fairly complex program, and specifically, Council Member, to your question of sweeping, the sweeping program is now an annual and year-round program. And we've put a lot of energy and we've moved a lot of resources towards that, and we're still making improvements to sweeping. But yes, in between storm events, we do sweep, and we try to sweep when weather will allow. So in the last 3 weeks, we have had suspended service with the exception of about 3 days late last week, where we were able to get in some sweeping time before this next round of storms. Our focused efforts start on the main streets. So you mentioned a number of them. We start with the 4th Street corridor and Cedar Hill and downtown areas. And we really do try to address those main streets first in priority. We have 2 sweeper operators that work the graveyard shift, and they will hit all of those areas when there's a lot less traffic and a lot less conflict. And then we have 1 sweeper operator in the daytimes that catches those slower roads with less traffic, maybe entrances to neighborhoods. But really our effort is concentrated on mains, bike routes, and intersections at this point. And then as weather starts to clean up and we start to get out of snow operations, we will start to really address it as hard as possible. We'll throw an extra sweeper and operator onto that operation. And the difficulty at this point is every time we get a little bit cleaned up, we have a morning like this morning where we go out and we put out another 100 tons of cinders. So it's constant, and I know it's definitely something that we all want to keep an eye on, but we are going to see continued repeated efforts. And then as we get into this storm cycle, Our goal would be to sweep those in between the storm events. Please keep in mind that our operators also switch to snow operations. So during the poor weather and the winter conditions, sweeping is not really a program that can function anyhow. So we take those operators and they switch over to snow operations to assist us in that program while they're waiting on sweepers to defrost and get back onto the roads. So I know it's a long answer, but it is a long and arduous process. If you recall, last year we did an analysis and we calculated the amount of cinders we put out in every snow event and then how fast we can pick them up. And it would take, weeks, if not months, to get to all of the routes, all 700 miles, every ton of cinders. And they've really made a lot of effort. But you'll see again in this upcoming budget, we're going to request some more resources to go to that important program.
Thank you, Scott, for that. And quick follow-up question for you. I wonder, because on the roads, there is a very clear line of where the sweeper, basically reaches. And often the bike lane doesn't make that cutoff. I wonder, obviously cars are impacted by the cinders, but not as much as cyclists are. Would there be a way to have the sweeper go along the edge of the road where the bike lane is and overlap that and leaving the middle of the road basically exposed to a pileup of cinders? Would that make any sense at all?
So actually, Councilmember, that is our practice. We start on the roadway edge and in the bike lane. I think what we do see oftentimes, and you might be seeing this as well, is if there's a snow berm or there's residual ice in the lane, we may be able to sweep right up to that edge of ice. And then as it starts to melt out in the next day or the 3-day temperature rise after storms, that recess of snow and ice just starts to show more cinder. So it's repeated passes and it's constant attention. But really, we start on the edge of the roadway and we actually work towards the middle with the exception of intersections.
Okay, that must be what I'm seeing is like a week after the snow came and it's all melted. That's good to know. Okay, thank you, Scott. And Mayor, if I may, I just have a couple other comments on the report. I'll just say them really quick. I think in the city manager's report, there's some really, really important things outlined, especially within our police departments. And I just wanted to bring awareness to Corporal Late. Chief, you'll have to correct me, but I think it's Leyva, and Corporal Leyva's de-escalation specifically. And I just want to read this one sentence that says, ultimately, Corporal Leyva established a relationship of trust and was able to talk him into walking out of the house without the firearm, and was able to connect with him to mental health resources. You have to read the whole write-up on this. It's an incredible story, and it just gives me goosebumps learning about what Corporal Leyva did in his de-escalation in this situation. It could have easily turned out to be a much worse situation in our community, and I'm just so grateful for Corporal Leyva's efforts, along with Officer Mike Randall's work with the youth member in our community who is also autistic. And this is a very heartwarming story, learning also about Officer Randall's purchase of a remote control car that he gifted to the kids. And then, of course, our emergency communication specialist, Celeste Hansen, and her efforts over the phone are just tremendous. So thank you all. And then I just also wanted to bring awareness to the Green Book and to Heidi and Hansen and her team. Excellent work on that. Very interesting history there, and glad that we're bringing that back to life. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Manager, and thank you, Team Flagstaff.
Mr. Mayor, may I jump in and wrap up here?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni, for calling out those stories in the manager's report. They are heartwarming, and it seems like we have some to share with you every time because these life-saving efforts and heroics are ongoing, as they are with the fire department. And there are some nice narratives there, along with some congratulations to share with our firefighters. Going back to the snow event, I would be remiss if I did not call out something that happens every time we get clobbered with a pretty good snowfall, and that is the collaborative effort that happens with amongst our staff. Yeah, it's the Public Works Street Division that's at the heart of it all. But when we have events like we did a few weeks ago, we had members of our solid waste section, parks section, of course, the shovel crews, the Water Services Division, on-call temporary operators. Everybody comes together and helps. And that was the event a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You have some photos there for your reading enjoyment to illustrate all of that collaboration. You called out some other items there, Councilmember Shimoni, the Green Book, a fascinating narrative on all of that and its relevance here in Flagstaff. Thank you for those who contributed. A few miscellaneous updates. I want to also offer Shannon Anderson, our Deputy City Manager, an opportunity to fill in any blanks. I've been doing all the talking on this. She did a lot of the work. Shannon, what have I missed that you would like to touch on? And you heard the question earlier, Shannon, about the COVID presentation next week. If there's anything you would like to add to that, feel free to do so. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate helping you put together the city manager's report and the opportunity to share the good work that our staff do on behalf of the community on a regular basis. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. I don't really have anything else to add. You will see another great story during the next city manager's report about a fire rescue that occurred over the weekend. And COVID, we will be joined by Parks and Recreation staff, as well as have community development staff available and library director as well to help us provide you with the updates on behalf of COVID. So looking forward to that discussion. And in the meantime, if you have any questions about things that you might be hearing or more information, please let us know.
Thank you, Shannon. Mr. Mayor, Council, that wraps it up for the report. Thank you for giving us your audience and a little bit of time on this.
Thank you, City Manager. We are then down to agenda item number 15, our informational items. And I will just call out our council members here, starting with Vice Mayor, assuming you don't have a pistachio or a dog barking. Make sure you get your glass of water first.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Aslan.
Two things, Mr. Mayor, if I may. The first is that Representative Grijalva and our Representative O'Halloran are introducing a Grand Canyon Protection Act this week, and it looks like it's going to a floor vote next Wednesday, February 24th. So it's pretty quick. It's HR 1052 for those who like to follow numbers and such. And it's going to be packaged with something called HR 803, which is the Wilderness Protection Act of 2021. And I'm hoping in the next week or so, if possible, we can get council to weigh in on this and update our previous historic letter or resolution of support for uranium uranium mining ban on the Colorado Plateau and everything that's also in that bill. So Greg, I'll leave that to you to how to process that, or procedurally how to go forward with that. But I think it would be great if we could get council to weigh in on that with some new language in support of that. Those folks could use the help. And then the second thing, and again, Greg is our city manager. You're going to know better how to proceed with this. But I'm also thinking about how we're going to start reintroducing our recovery effort here at the city level with vaccinations coming out and but cases still out there. I don't think we're really anywhere near herd immunity, and we still have lots going on. So there's lots to consider there. But one of the things that I would like to consider that I don't think we've been talking about much lately is how does city staff and city employees feel about returning to work or returning to normal in a more, going down those levels of tiers. I'm wondering if there's a way we could survey our city employees. I know there's upwards around 1,800, 2,000 of them. And not that this would be in any way sort of a binding census, but I think it's good information to have included with the totality of information to know where the pulse of the city is at in terms of wanting to be back in the buildings, wanting to have these things open up, and just get a sense of if whether or not our city employees feel safe going back up through those tiers as a part of the information that we have at our disposal when coming to these difficult decisions. And whatever that looks like, if that's something that there's time to include next week, I don't know. I would hope that if we do some sort of census or survey, that it would be as scientific as possible, given the circumstances. But I'll leave that to you. And again, this might be something we all need to weigh in on before there's direction for you to move forward. But it's something that I've been thinking about and would love to have my ear, to the ground on. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, may I respond briefly?
My apology. I don't believe so, because we're in the information session.
Oh, that's indeed. We will follow through on that. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. We are to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a fare that I'd like to propose, and I'll read it. Considering, incidentally, I sent this to the city clerk and to the city manager, so you don't have to take notes. You'll have it in your email box. Considering that the city is in a housing crisis, I request a future agenda item request to have the council review barriers to homeowners building auxiliary dwelling units, which of course is ADUs, on their properties. In particular, but not limited to, the fair would evaluate the pros and cons of the rules that would put a homeowner in violation if they sell their home and therefore would no longer be living in either the ADU or the primary residence. This could be addressed directly by the council or addressed by the council after a timely review by the Housing Commission. So that's the fare that I would like to have considered in the future. Thank you. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to thank the mayor and council members who supported my previous fair item. I do have a new fair item seeking a discussion on the review of our current tax code with respect to exemptions on rental, leasing, licensing of real property tax for TPT. The reason why I'm putting forth this fair is current exemptions for the privilege tax are qualifying hospital, qualifying community health center, or qualifying healthcare organization. However, it doesn't include nonprofits providing service to individuals with disabilities in a residential daycare or employment services setting, like the services provided by Hoshoni and Quality Connections. I understand this organizations, and there may be other organizations providing similar services, who are charged a pass-through TP3 from their landlords. So yes, you know, I'm putting forth this fair item for a future discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple things I actually forgot to mention earlier. I'm just going to mention it now. I wanted to give a shout out to the co-chairs of the Indigenous Commission at the city, Mrs. Cora Phillips and Mr. Joe Washington. They were appointed to be the co-chairs of the commission, and it is exciting. It is very exciting. And also, of course, thank you to our coordinator for Indigenous Initiatives, Rose Tohi, for helping out with that group. Very much looking forward to seeing the discussions had and the recommendations brought forward. Mountain Line, our board meets tomorrow, and that is Councilmember Sweet and I who are on that board. So looking forward to that meeting and reporting back to the group next week. A couple things I just want to mention. I am looking into a thing called an Arizona stop, which basically allows cyclists to kind of roll through stop signs when there aren't other vehicles present versus coming to a complete stop and then continuing forward. We might be the first city in the state to do this, but it's not something that is uncommon across the nation. So stay posted on that, more information to come. I am very much looking forward to our conversation about youth sports in our COVID update next week and figuring out how we can move forward with that. I think we all know this, but the county has released the vaccine capabilities to the 1B category entirely. And both the county and the NAH, our hospital, has quite a bit of vaccines. I don't know if they still have excess, but I would assume that they do. And they have open slots of times of which you can register at online or over the phone. I wanted to give a shout out to Amy Hagan at the city and her team. And I see our city manager has booked his appointment, and so have I, and I am very excited. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Amy Hagan and her team at Parks and Rec for adjusting and fixing the basketball hoop at Thorpe Park. The net was all off, and it was a pain in the butt to shoot around. And now that it's fixed, I've really enjoyed playing basketball alone, and the relief that has given me mentally and physically to get through these stressful times. So thank you. And then last but not least, I think a lot of folks already know this, but additional funding support has been released through the state for rent assistance. It goes live on February 23rd. So, just saw our city manager doesn't have an appointment, but regardless, if anyone needs rental support, the funding goes live, I believe, at the beginning on February 23rd. And to go to des.az.gov/ERAP. And this was all part of a recent press release from the governor. So take a look at that, spread the word, and let's make sure we're all paying our rents if we can. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Good meetings today. And be well, everybody.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Councilmember Sweet.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And that goes for myself as well. I have nothing to add at this time. With that being said, I just would like to say thank you for this efficient meeting, and I appreciate all the presentations and the things that we got done in good time. So thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. And this meeting is now adjourned.